Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. I apologize for my fan spinning up like crazy. I don't know if you can hear. My microphone is a little bit further away from my Mac, so you probably shouldn't be able to. But yeah, we actually have a decent amount to talk about. Obviously, like the big news and rumors. There is still a little bit of like everyone is still mostly coping or dealing with the aftermath of WWDC. People are providing their takes, some of them pretty hot, some of them very much L takes, and we will be reacting to some of them today. As always, I'm also, of course, open to hearing suggestions of what else you would like to see me cover and who else you would like me to react to. Today, we are primarily reacting to Drew from Tailosive Tech and John Prosser from Front Page Tech. We have Riley in the chat, we have Steve, we have Angelica. Guys, I'm going to be reading your stuff a little bit later on. If you really insist on reaching me, you guys know super chat, super stickers, you know the drill. I also highly recommend, and that's why I deliberately left the link in the chat, so none of you have to do it, because I forgot that links apparently that you send can only be seen by me, but not the rest. Nevertheless, so join our Discord. There's a lot that we talk about. Small shout out to Blender, which saw a really nice performance improvement. So basically, Blender took like half a minute to a minute. For me, it took on my M1 Max MacBook Pro, it took 42 seconds before the latest update to load Blender. And now witness with me how quick it all goes after 4.4 release. 1, 2, 3, go. And boom, we are already inside Blender after about just 2 seconds. So yeah, for news like these, basically Blender was rewritten with the Vulkan API rather than relying on the old and barely supported, I don't think it's updated anymore, OpenGL API. So while it has huge improvements on Windows, it feels like it's even crazier on Mac, to be quite honest. And the other shout out that I wanted to give is a little bit to myself. It's kind of a question towards all of you guys as we've been growing, as we've been attracting new people. I've asked that in Discord as well, got some positive feedback. So basically, and we will probably not be doing much of gaming today, but in the future, given that some streams don't have videos specifically to react to, right? I do have my iPad next to me as a secondary monitor. So when it comes to additional content for you to basically be entertained by, I was thinking of injecting a little bit more gameplay into it. Right now, that's stuff like Resident Evil. Basically, I would try to focus mostly on things that are supported on Mac. Maybe I would do a little bit of like game streaming from my PlayStation, seeing how that works. So this would be simultaneously entertaining, but also educational, basically edutainment or whatever the word is. So you can let me know how you feel about it. I mean, I can give you a little bit of a feeling. We have the sound disabled, the music at the very least, but you can see plenty of stuff to do. I'm running this just to show you, because we are talking about this from a tech perspective. I'm running this on my M1 Max MacBook Pro. I'm running this at 1080p with MetalFX quality upscaling, so that should be probably around 720p. We have Nathan join the chat. Hello to you. I have variable frame rate. That's the benefit of running it on a ProMotion screen, so I don't need to set up like a VSync with a hard frame rate cap. I have 4K resolution for cinematics, and I believe high quality textures somewhere. Texture filtering is high, anisotropic filtering at 4x. I could get that even higher, but that's pretty pointless. At that point, it makes just more sense to increase the resolution. Yeah, so basically a decent graphical setup, nothing too crazy. Not even sure at what frame rate I'm running this at. on my PS5 Pro, I run this at about 1080p native at 120 FPS, or like around 1440p at 60 FPS. Nathan, I'm doing really fine. Just came home from work, freshened up, got myself a drink to enjoy with you. Cheers to a nice stream that we'll have together. Yeah, so basically, this is a suggestion for how we can spice up the content in the future. And of course, this will also allow me to speak a little bit more about things like the Mac gaming experience, right? It would allow me to be a little bit more up to date when I watch videos with you together from people like Andrew Tsai or Mr. Mac Wright. Basically, plenty of stuff to enjoy and plenty of stuff here to learn, because I know a lot of you care about like performance metrics, Mac gaming support. Now, obviously, I won't be running to buy 20 pieces of hardware to compare together, but that's about what we can do, right? Whatever Mac I have at the time, which for the next 2 years is probably gonna be my M1 Max MacBook Pro. Now that the fans are spinning up, now I understand the purpose of a desktop PC more and more. And yeah, I am controlling this with a mouse. Obviously, that my trackpad wouldn't be quite good enough for this. Yeah, so, and in the future, there's also, of course, beyond big AAA games, there's also all the smaller stuff that is supported on Mac. There are a ton of emulators where I can show you what's the state of like the performance of like the 3DS emulation and things like that. Yeah, so that's basically my suggestion. Keep me up to date what you think about stuff like this. I'll be canceling this because it's extremely hot today. And it's basically impossible to be next to like fans running at max speed. I mean, I could make my apartment fan run a lot more, but then it's static and interference with the microphone. So basically, that's my intro stuff. We have Solomon joining the chat. A lot of now familiar faces, basically people we gained over our last week's coverage of Apple's WWDC. A lot of familiar faces too. Thank you so much for growing our community here and on Discord. Yeah, so we do have plenty to cover. I think I'll react first to a few smaller pieces of news that might be interesting to you guys before I get into a little bit of political coverage here. Why am my fan still at basically max speed? Do manual. It shouldn't be running too hot now that I have Resident Evil disabled. I'll even give it a little bit more wiggle room than usual. So yeah, TG Fan Pro, great app. I know a lot of people complain that certain things are not like managed by default by macOS and that they require a little bit tuning through third-party tools. But for me, I have honestly enjoyed that freedom. It's different from like how the iPad runs, how the iPhone runs, and we can argue which approach is the best. To me, I think it's the best approach, kind of what Apple does right now, which is to relegate certain more pro stuff to like the Mac lineup and the easier, the more intuitive experience to their smaller, more mobile products, their devices that don't have active cooling, their devices that have significantly less memory, devices that don't have support for like the terminal, things like that. Solomon saying, you installed macOS 26 Tahoe and I regretted my battery suffering. Well, you can already see even from what I'm doing, right? I have disabled Resident Evil, and that's obviously was the main like driver of like battery and performance. But even now, right, even with my fan still very close to max, it doesn't fully cool down. That's a little bit of a bug right now. The battery seems to be running a lot hotter if if you charge and use at the same time. Now, I am doing all of this partially for my own curiosity, partially, of course, to please you guys and to collect information together with you. However, I do not recommend for the average consumer at all to install any betas outside of the public betas. Maybe with a .1 to .2 release, the developer betas are also less ambitious, so they tend to be less buggy. But when we are talking about major releases, iOS 17, 18, now not 19, but 26, really wait that extra month, wait for the public beta, and you'll be so much better than dealing with the hassles of a developer release. Guys, that's about it for the intro. That's a lot of babbling. That's a lot of very different topics at the same time. Shout out for you to do all the YouTube jazz before we start. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. Like the video. Share it out to anybody who you think might enjoy it. Comment. You guys have seen in the last few videos, and in general, I love interacting with a lively live stream, getting your suggestions, getting your agreements, your disagreements. You can support me directly with super chats and super stickers. You can become a channel member here on YouTube. Shout out to Angelica, Steve, Max, Maximus, and Jonathan, who are our MarkTech Pro Max supporters. Of course, join the Discord. Follow me on all the social media links that are linked in the descriptions of this channel. So plenty of stuff for you to do to engage with me, to engage with the growing community, and of course to suggest new stuff. So today, let's start with some really good news, which I've seen that being actually debated, which is people saying like, oh, is that actually happening, or was that already in like iOS 18 or something like that? Nathan, you asked me how am I doing. I think I responded to that. If you send some kind of link or something like that, then it might have been deleted. That's unfortunately how it goes. That's why I add links for stuff like Discord, even though I know some of you would do it yourselves if you could. So basically with iOS 26, you know the feature where you always get like the meme, whoever invented that should get a raise and whatever, right? Whenever you get a code for a two-factor authentication thing, let's say it's a bank thing or an account for something like Netflix or whatever, right? And you get it mostly as an SMS, sometimes per email. Now, previously it obviously worked in Apple's own apps, right? Like the Messages app for SMS and Apple's Mail app. Now it works in third-party messaging, email, and even browser apps. So seems like the system is far more aware, because this is happening, as far as I understand, right now without like API support. So this is basically just the system getting that data and understanding contextually, oh, you're trying to log in here, right here you just got a notification. So I assume this is like partially like AI powered or something like that, and down the line I would assume it will probably get like official Apple APIs. That being said, yes, if you get your like two-factor authentication codes in something like Gmail, of course, or another browser, or like an app like WhatsApp, I've seen people already post examples of all that kind of stuff. Yeah, you can now basically use that data automatically with the same suggestion prompt right over the keyboard. So really cool, really pro-consumer stuff, really. This is one thing that I've really liked. It's partially coming from the regulatory pressure that the European Union is putting on Apple, also like other regulation bodies in the United States, basically to make iOS a little bit more open to everything, to give third-party developers some of the same tools that Apple has in designing their own apps and features. And basically we see more and more examples of that. We've covered, for example, the full screen album cover art that can be displayed on the lock screen now. And this is actually a feature that simultaneously comes out as an Apple Music feature, but simultaneously Apple releases also an developer framework, an API that is available to developers like Spotify or Tidal, or I assume even companies like YouTube, so they can replicate it too. So for one, Spotify cannot complain that Apple favors its own tools over the way that they treat other companies. So I think I can reduce the fans a little bit now. Seems like my system has relaxed after playing Resident Evil. And we have more people joining. Really, really glad to see that. The other piece of news that I've been actually kind of surprised about is about iPhone sales in the United States and China specifically. Now, iPhone sales climbed 15% year over year during April and May, signaling Apple's strongest two-month performance for the period since the pandemic. This is coming from Counterpoint, which is usually one of the best researchers when it comes to big product sales like iPhone, Samsung Galaxy, the console stuff, right? And a lot of this growth is actually coming from the United States and China, which the United States to me makes perfect sense. Because of Trump's tariffs, we all assumed that there would be a lot of impulse purchasing inside the United States, people fearing that there would be a 20 or a 30 or 145% tax upon deliveries from China, and basically buying iPhones so that they can avoid paying that kind of hefty premium if they buy the product in a month or so. But what shocks me here is actually China, because I expected China to be the inverse. For one, China obviously doesn't face tariffs on iPhones because iPhones are made in China. But also, more importantly, I thought that a lot of nationalistic backlash in China because of stuff like Trump's tariffs and just general antagonism towards China and threatening companies that you have to pull out or you have to start producing your stuff in the United States. I really thought that that would benefit a lot of Chinese manufacturers and hurt companies like Apple. Seemingly, that's not the case. Now, the data that's provided, unfortunately, does not give us an insight into too much individual sales. It seems like the 16E is somewhat successful even in markets like Japan. So I guess you can look it up yourself and do your own conclusions. To me, it seems like the iPhone 16E is relatively well received. It's not contributing to Apple like increasing their overall sales by 25 or 30% or something like that, but seemingly it is enough to improve sales overall. So it's definitely a smart replacement to the iPhone SE as it existed previously in the lineup. Should be, of course, noted, it is more expensive. So I think that's at least partially holding back its sales potential. Let's see if Apple next year comes up with something cheaper. If tariffs come into effect, that's definitely not happening. But hey, you can always hope. And of course, how Apple changes it, right? Will Apple go a little bit of like the iPhone XR to 11 route, like giving us double the cameras, even better battery life and stuff like that, while actually reducing pricing by $50? Or will it be a very lazy update? My assumption is that it will probably get the dynamic island interface and a front display that gets brighter, basically getting a lot of the tech from the iPhone 16, because the iPhone 17 will be moving towards LTPO and ProMotion. So probably that will be already enough, plus an A19 chip, the base version, also assuming it will probably not get the 12 gigabytes of RAM that are rumored for like the iPhone 17 Air and devices like that. So yeah, a very interesting future for the entire Apple lineup. Obviously, we're also looking forward to a future where Apple introduces foldables, a complete redesign for the 2027 iPhone. But if sales honestly are performing really well without all that stuff, I think Apple's future in that regard is very, very bright, especially given that this is happening in very challenging economic situations right now. Now, this is something I'm not gonna watch because I think this is just pure cringe, and I've covered, I believe, one of those ads before. So basically, Google has this like humoristic ad that makes fun of iPhone indirectly. Nobody cares. Nobody buys Pixels in anywhere near the amount they buy even any individual iPhone model, much less the entire iPhone lineup. But yeah, basically, Google is poking fun at iOS 26, saying features like translation and spam filtering have been inside Pixels for a few years. However, while that is cringe and there are plenty of things to point out in like Android 16 that are like direct copies from Apple, and also like historically stuff like Google at some point copying the entire gesture user interface of the iPhone 10, right? When you remember, there were Android devices before the iPhone 10 that had like full screen gesture based multitasking and stuff like that, but it worked really, really poorly. And after the iPhone was like on the market for 6 months to a year, Google said like, you know what, fuck it, we're just gonna copy what Apple did. Seems to be the best solution, seems to also be what people are largely more used to. So I think it's just hilarious. But what also really like made me chuckle was when I saw this, I had a question like, why is the Pixel naked here, but the iPhone is wearing a case? Right, especially like such a relatively bulky case that makes the iPhone look like almost like it has no real texture or like no identity. Right, it looks very plasticky. Doesn't look outright cheap, but doesn't look premium in any way. While the Pixel is like allowed to have like this shine on the side. It's like, was Google afraid of? Did they get like backlash in previous videos that like, oh, your ads are funny, but the iPhone looks way better aesthetically here? Is that what they did? Like, were they, or is there some kind of storyline? Again, I do not care about this. I will not give this the time of day, even for more than 30 seconds. But yeah, it just was funny to me because while everyone was like, oh, Google is dunking on Apple, I'm like, yeah, we have all acknowledged that these features were on Google Pixel. That's what I said during my live reaction to WWDC. But I've also said that there are a ton of features that while I reacted to the Android 16 video by 9 to 5 Google, how much of it is copied from iOS, with things like live activities are not being something that's inspired by iPhone or being a common feature that is now being improved. Like spam filtering in a way has always been like a feature in something, like at least in mail, right? So Apple is basically not as much copying Google as they're just doing something that has been done in other forms of like communication media. Yeah, basically this is very cringe, and I think that these kinds of sales numbers, successes, show that nobody fucking cares about what Google has to say about the Pixel. Please, Google, give us a good Pixel 10. Give us a 3nm chip that's very efficient, finally not 3 generations behind in terms of raw performance. Give us a good cooling system. Give us an advanced battery. I often bring up silicon carbon batteries, and for example, why they aren't on the Pro iPhones, right? Like the logistical challenge of sourcing enough of those kinds of batteries for the Pro iPhones, because they sell in tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of units. Google does not have that issue. Google, at least for the Pro models, can easily source silicon carbon batteries. So do something that actually makes your phone actually better than the iPhone, rather than doing these stupid stupid ads. Solomon saying Apple will ship the same design of the E but with a powerful chip as usual. Well, the same. Why would it be the same design though? That makes, because there is still potential with the dynamic island. Apple has other designs up their sleeve. Right now, you get the slimmest bezel on the Pro. You get slightly thicker bezels on the base 16s, and then you get the notch with even thicker bezels on the E. But you have to understand, there is a competitive market in India, in China, of devices that basically only have a cutout for the camera. You have plenty of devices in the $600 to $700 range, which have triple cameras, almost flagship level processors, a lot larger batteries than the 4000 milliamp hours. I'm not saying that Apple needs to directly compete with that market, but there are things that Apple can and will address. Maybe not necessarily with the 17E, but definitely by the time we get to like the 18E, I think it would be a crime to not give it the dynamic island design. Not to forget that by 2027, we are supposed to be getting a major refresh on the dynamic island design with either a much thinner dynamic island or maybe no cutouts at all, as some have speculated. So no, I don't think that the 16E will just simply stagnate. Oh my god, it's so warm inside that just like after half an hour, my Coke is already piss warm. Jesus Christ. And of course, this is what's in the thumbnail. One of the major three topics I wanted to cover today. Now, I actually don't want to waste too much time on it because you guys know what I think of President Trump. You guys know that I'm a centrist left winger, a center left person basically. I'm a member of the Social Democratic Party here in Germany. Again, none of that really matters. There are plenty of socially conservative and fiscally conservative people that I get nicely along with. I hate Trump for all kinds of reasons. However, I do need to call this out because this is covering one of the topics that obviously concerns me, which is smartphones. So basically, the Trump company, all the bullshit that's left by Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., basically they partnered with American carriers to bring out their own like Trump mobile service, and for 47.25, I have no idea. Like, I guess that's because he is the 47th president, right? And it's the year 2025. Cringe bullshit, but whatever, right? They basically give you internet services. Now, that's a lot more expensive than companies like Mint Mobile in the United States, which charge you like between 20 and 30 bucks. But it also includes a lot of bullshit. Like you get like telemedicine from Doctegrity. You get roadside assistance by Drive America. Well, at least that's something. And you get mobile device protection by Omega Mobile Care. However, and what's funny here is that that device they're covering, which they're saying is a $500 device, the Trump T1 phone, is like some bullshit Chinese thing that's like just a rebrand that we have. Like T-Mobile sells a product that's pretty much exactly like that. They say it's gold, by which I assume they just mean it's golden in color. So I have no idea. Solomon, I agree that the dynamic island is a premium feature, but don't forget, premium features do scale down eventually. It made sense for the iPhone SE to have a dramatically worse design, even for its time, because it was dramatically cheaper. But the 16E, and following the 17E and so on, are a lot closer in price to the base models, to the Pro models, than the SE was. By your logic, we wouldn't have gotten something like the 10th generation iPad, which basically has the same design aesthetic as an iPad Pro, but with slightly thicker borders. Right? So I don't, plus it's not gonna be like Dynamic Island is like a lot more expensive. You already have Face ID in there, right? You already have the screens that are now being used for the iPhone 16, screens that you are not going to be utilizing anymore for the base models. So why not do that? Plus, you can still keep the bezel thicker than on the regular 17 and the 17 Pro or 18. Let's see, maybe that it happened, the redesign happens a year later. Plus, by that point, you would, I think that Apple's premium feature will be more something like like the foldable aspect and the glass redesign of the 2027 iPhone. I was gonna come to that, which is that the phone gets some specs which for $500 on the first glance don't seem too bad. Then you consider though that so it has a 6.8-inch AMOLED screen. It has 3 cameras with a 50 megapixel main and seemingly two 2 megapixel cameras. So is there a link to that? Is that the link? No, that's the article. Really? Ah, Jesus. Do I need to look for that? Trumo mobile. Okay, switch to English. Trump mobile launches a bold. Oh yeah, it's from the Trump organization. Jesus Christ! What's verify you're a human? For their with and verify it without Jesus. That's so bad. So this is from Eric Trump, from Trump's other son, the even dumber one. I don't want to call him the dumb one because that would imply that Donald Trump Jr. is not dumb. I'm incredibly excited to step into this new digital space. Hardworking Americans deserve a wireless. I would read it in Trump's voice, but it's Eric. So basically, I should be talking like I have a piece of fish stick in my mouth. Okay, I'm incredibly excited to step into this new digital space. Hardworking Americans deserve a wireless service that's affordable, reflects their values, and delivers reliable quality they can count on. We're especially proud to offer free long-distance calling to military members and their families, because those serving overseas should always be safe to stay connected to the people they love back home. The phone doesn't even have a flashlight at the back. Yeah, and of course the tri-camera, or the stovetop arrangement, as Drew from Tailosive Tech calls it, that's designed to be an iPhone copy. So hopefully you enjoyed that glorious reading provided by me. So that's what you get for your 47. Wait, 45? Oh, it's because, wait, so some people, I guess there was some miscommunication. I mean, he was the 45th president, then Biden is 46, and now he is 47 again. I still think it's stupid. I think he should always be the 45th president. But yeah, 47, 45, that's something the MAGA crowd has been getting off on. Complete device protection for international calling, including who are bravely serving in our military abroad. Man, that military dick riding goes hard. No contracts, no credit check. Jesus, I assume they want to convince all the poor Trump fans to go this. Now this is Donald Trump Jr., so I'm not gonna read it in the same kind of R-worded way. Trump Mobile is going to change the game. We're building on the movement to put America first, and we will deliver the highest levels of quality and service. Our company is based right here in the United States because we know it's what our customers want and deserve. I lost my composure in the end. So this is a very clever wording for very dumb people because it says our company is based right here in the United States. You know what other company is based right here in the United States? In the state of California, in that case, it's Apple. Like people are thinking that being based in the United States means they're suddenly going to be producing and building this in the United States. Yeah, no shot. So they're working with all three major carriers. This is a huge disappointment to me. It shows just how much corruption has unfortunately changed the very nature of the United States free market, where companies are lining up to kiss the ring. And the moronic sons of the dear leader. But hey, it's business, right? But when it comes to the actual product, Jesus Christ, where's the Trump phone? Trump mobile launches. So, Jesus Christ, it's all so bad. Hotels, golf, residential estates. Oh Jesus. Yeah, it's real. He looks like the what I read. Commercial? I mean, it would be technology, but are they too dumb? What? Trump mobile. Wait, where's the phone itself? Do I have to type it Trump mobile T1? What do they advertise for it? Maybe this links to the oh Jesus Christ. The Trump organization is a blah blah blah, the $500 phone. Okay, will debut a T1 phone with a price tag of $499 with a down payment of $100. I already saw people like Snazzy from Snazzy Labs buying this basically to make it reviewed. The phone will be available in August. Also, the Trump website states that the phone will debut in September. So the device will have a fingerprint sensor and face recognition. So my assumption, this is simple camera-based recognition. 256 gigabytes of internal storage, 12 gigs of RAM. Again, no details on the chip as far as I understand. And the website crashed from what we saw. Jesus, can I please switch to English again? Jesus, Google is so bad at handling multi-language setups. Trump T1. Change to English. Okay. The T1 phone, Trump Mobile, trumpmobile.com. So 120 hertz, 6.8 inch, 6.78 inch punch hole AMOLED screen, 50 megapixel main camera. So no mention of what those other two cameras are. AI face unlock. Okay. 12 gigs of RAM. No mention of the processor. USB Type-C at USB 2.0 speeds, a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. It has Android 15. It charges at 20 watts for 5,000 milliampere hour. Oh yeah, and there it is. It has a depth sensor that has 2 megapixels and a macro camera that's 2. So these are completely worthless. They're basically just here so they can copy the iPhone design. And seemingly it's almost a one-to-one copy of other Chinese devices. And yes, the T1 phone, does it all just bring up this website? Yeah. And the 16 megapixel selfie camera. Okay, so this is all bullshit. Yeah. The other 2 megapixels, and one is like a depth sensor, which always confused me because at that point, why not use LiDAR or something like that, which captures actual depth data? There's no processor in RAM. Well, they say it's 12 gigs of RAM, which I love that they have a processor and RAM portion without the processor, and then they have a memory which they call internal storage, which is correct. So why not? Like ideally, you would have processor, then memory would be a RAM and internal storage. So this is even poorly sorted. Yeah, this is all bullshit. This device is supposedly launching at the end of the year. This is like a $250 Android device that they're repackaging at double the price. This is complete crap. And with a down payment, quite honestly, I'm not even convinced that this will not turn into some shit show where they will be like, oh, you know what? We couldn't provide it, but hey, we took your money already and you love us enough to forgive us those $100. We're reinvesting it right into Trump's re-election campaign. And people will be like, re-election for like a third term? Well, they're like, oh, shit, yeah, sure. That's totally legal constitutionally. Yeah, basically, again, I do not want to waste my time on this. This is coming from the family that sold you Trump steaks, Trump vodka, Trump University. So no, I'm not believing. I'm believing that this is a real product because it's basically just completely rebranded dog shit. But I do not believe that this is actually a product that has anything to do with like manufacturing in the United States, research and development in the United States. This is a complete scam. 200 is the reach for this specs. Well, the screen, I guess, right? It's granted, this is definitely not like an LTPO screen that we're using. I assume the quality here will be significantly less than basically most LTPS screens at $500. And I assume, though it doesn't mention it 120 hertz here, but even if it does support 120 hertz, I highly assume that the screen isn't actually tuned for that. And Riley, congratulations to becoming #1 chatter here. I saw Nathan took your spot for a moment. I saw Steve taking your spot for a moment. But now you're back on top. Congrats on that. So guys, this is basically the tangible rumors, the stuff that we can read on a website and stuff like that. However, we are YouTubers here, or at least I am, apparently. And we are live streamers, so let us react to what some other YouTubers have to say about the WWDC, about the liquid glass redesign, and a lot more. So I didn't know that Drew reacted to the actual design, but he called the video a rant, which kind of spiked my attention. He called it a rant on WWDC 2025 interviews, which again, they were a lot more critical than people expected. I think some people just came in with a preconceived notion that like, oh, without John Gruber, that means Apple is not doing real interviews. And then they ended up having like almost 50 minutes talk with several people. They had like a half an hour interview with Joanna Stern, which was very confrontational, at least by the standards of like a friendly big event like WWDC. They got nothing on the Yap Master. Yep, I'm yapping right over there. Yep. But as much as I disagree with Drew, just from the get-go here, because his recent takes have basically all been ass. That being said, I did not pre-watch, so maybe I'll actually end up changing my mind. However, there's another video, and that's coming from, well, previously one of the most important leakers in the Apple field, John Prosser from Front Page Tech. In fact, he was the first to leak actual photos of the visionOS inspired redesign that ended up being liquid glass, which is now, of course, coming to iOS 26, iPadOS 26, macOS 26, watchOS 26, tvOS 26. But now, apparently, according to John, we're not talking about liquid glass, but liquid ass, and why iOS 26 is terrible. Guys, without further ado, let's look into this.
Yeah.
he gained some weight back, right? Which is not bad. Doesn't look bad on him. He's like a strong dude, but he was very skinny for a time. Which again, if he feels comfortable, that's the most important thing. As long as he's healthy, of course. But that's up to him to know. Just saying. That's the first thing that came to my mind.
They ruined it. Just as we had leaked over the last few months, Apple gave us the first redesign to iOS in over a decade. A design,
I mean, yeah, 12 years. If we don't count any of the small adjustments since iOS 27, since iOS 12. Liquid as well, he's using that title primarily for one reason, which is that like when Apple initially launched Liquid Glass as a YouTube video explaining the design, YouTube basically put the play button, right, that big red one that you get on over thumbnails, right over GL, right? So it looked like we were Apple's new redesign was called Liquid Ass, which is funny, right? But now he is using that visual to basically excuse being way more negative than he has any right to be. But again, I did not pre-watch. I got some people basically summarizing this on Twitter. I saw him getting some backlash for being way too negative, but we'll see.
that works.
By the way, we've been speeding up a lot recently. I don't think that's necessary with John's talking speed.
So well for a product like Vision Pro. Floating glass-like elements in a three-dimensional space makes digital UI pieces feel like real life. But the question has been, if they're going to bring that style of design to the iPhone, how will a design modeled for a 3D...
Okay, so the control center stuff, and we've covered this, and we have non-stop coverage about this on our Discord. Again, feel free to join it. This is the first beta, and I have I cannot say this enough. I've said it now like 100 times. Yes, there should be a more intense blur for control center, just like it was prior. But this is like one setting to tune. It's already applying a little bit of a blur, so Apple just has to increase that blur a little bit. I'm almost certain that this will happen over the next few betas. This could also be a bug. I've seen several bugs in the operating system that are obviously not designed to be the final look. And people are just grabbing on to the control center narrative, saying basically, oh, look how bad this looks. I especially love it when people combine it with a really bright wallpaper. I'm like, yeah, guys, you have to choose a wallpaper that like fits your needs. If you choose like a bright white wallpaper, then you will have to click on a feature like increase contrast, which is in accessibility settings. That's what it's for. If you have poor eyesight or if you're too stupid to use a decent wallpaper, that's what happens.
Space work inside of a 2D phone experience.
But again, the question behind the philosophy, I think, is valid. I do not think that liquid glass makes as much sense on iPhone as it does on Vision OS. Do I think it is really relevant at this point? No, because people wanted a redesign. Apple gave them one that is consistent with Apple Vision Pro and Vision OS, with the glasses that will be coming, with the supposedly kind of all glass design iPhone that we're getting in iPhone with the 2027 iPhone Pros. So no, this is not like completely out of place.
Turns out, it doesn't.
Yeah, that's just your opinion, man.
iOS 26 is officially shown off by Apple and officially available for download, at least for...
Again, no, it's not like you see what he did, right? He puts this at the end of the sentence.
And people who like to pretend they're developers so that they can get the beta early. And
yeah, right. So that's even a decent joke to point this out, right? But no, it's not. Yeah, it's officially available to download in the most technical understanding of the word. We are 3 months away from the official release.
who downloads the very first beta of a recently blown up software experience to their main device? Psychopaths! Liquid glass is what they're calling this new look. Well, this new vibe, really, because it's how it looks, but it's also how it feels. Honestly,
I love when people bring this up. This is an old Johnny Ive quote from the iOS 7 redesign video. I'm not gonna play it because if you play Apple material, a video gets immediately flagged and demonetized. Basically, what people misunderstand is that design is how it looks, how it feels, and yes, how it also works. However, there comes a point where the way that I design this slider really is pretty much meaningless, because once I have the muscle memory to know and there is at least some color to verify that a change has happened, I could make this brighter green or darker green. I could add a liquid glass effect over the slider. I could make it a 3D look, right? As if there is an actual button. I could give it a texture to make it look like an actual button, maybe more metallic or something like that. And comes a point where a design is still a design and will not fundamentally change how something works or feels, no matter what you do. Liquid glass does a lot to change how the OS feels, which is there is a deeper sense of interaction because and hierarchy in the design, because when you look through the glass elements, you know, oh, that search bar is on top of the app, right? You have elements dynamically changing shape slightly, and you have elements not taking up the entire width of the phone, giving you like a more immersive view, similar to how Dynamic Island is more immersive than the Notch. The Dynamic Island control elements down on the bottom are more immersive than a full width, like 5 taps interface.
I don't think people truly realize how incredible of a feat this was to pull off. This real-time dynamic UI that refracts.
Okay, yeah, this is gorgeous. The way the notification center comes down, and when it hits whites, it refracts it into rainbow colors, just like real glass would. In this case, it's amazing.
On the fly, looking and feeling like actual glass. Absolutely incredible achievement by the design teams and engineers over at the spaceship in Cupertino. Honestly, I hope all of you are super, super proud of yourselves. Give yourself a nice pat on the back, but do it quietly, because you're just 20 minutes away from dancing on the grave of Steve Jobs. You work here, and he's buried here. If he ever finds out you did this.
Okay, so you have no idea who Steve was as a person. Whoever uses Steve would be displeased with that. We got that. Wait, by that logic, Steve would have been displeased for the last 12 years because the iOS 7 design launched after his death and, in fact, was not worked on while he was still alive and at the company. iOS 7 was actually kind of infamous for being finished in about 9 months, being extremely quickly for such a big redesign, especially since iOS at that point was still pretty immature. So it wasn't just that you got iOS 7, but you got even new features like the control center back in the day. I'm flabbergasted that people in 2025 will still bring up bullshit like, oh, Steve would be turning in his grave. It's like, by that logic, Steve is unhappy with Apple ever since his death, because they changed. Scott Forstall was gone basically a year after Steve died from the company. Then a year later came the huge redesign with iOS 7. Apple made an iPad mini, which Steve Jobs didn't want to. Apple made a larger iPad. Apple made a keyboard and trackpad case for the iPad. Apple made way larger iPhones. First up to 4 inches, then 4.7 and 5.5. Now we are up at 6.9 inches. So no, Steve like, unless you think that Steve would be so set in his ways that he would have zero ability to adapt to the new tech market, which there is zero proof for that. Steve has always been able to go with the flow when it's needed while still providing his distinct stamp on a feature or a design. Like, no. This is
In
just
the early versions that we had seen and used for our leaks, things weren't nearly as transparent as they actually ended up being. And even then, it was rather hard to recreate and mock up.
Yes, it was hard to recreate because you don't have the expertise of an Apple designer.
Because when we were making it, contrast and visibility was a real issue. But we just had to guess where to fill in the blanks because surely Apple would know.
I mean, by the way, this works. You can increase contrast, or you can reduce transparency. This is basically how it looks if you click on reduce transparency in accessibility settings.
Know how to solve the design issues, right? After all, we are just us, and they are an entire team of extremely talented individuals collectively tap dancing on the grave of Steve Jobs.
I'm actually really disliking this dude now. Like, I don't know. I try to not be personal when I react to stuff like that, but this actually feels like an insult. This reminds me of like when he back in the day made like videos on like why Apple lost its way and stuff like that. I actually have like Tailosive tech reaction front page tag, right? This was like back in the iPhone 10 era, right? Mine comes up first because front page tech and Tailosive tech are mentioned. Apple sheeps react to Apple sucks. That was 7 years ago, and that was Drew back in his very much more Apple sheep era, reacting to John Prosser. And now I am reacting to John Prosser and Drew. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Basically, what I'm saying, John has always done these things where it's hard for him to actually have a cohesive opinion or philosophy. He likes drama, which is fine, but I do think that, like, jumping on the very first developer beta, which he himself said is psychotic, is insane to me. Like, people have been online nonstop providing early betas for like OS 10 releases and things like that like look like ass in comparison to the final release. And I would argue that nothing in iOS 26 even looks like ass currently.
Yep, nailed that line. Great. Good job, myself. What are the signs of a stroke? Like, how would
making this video and then watching it and then reacting to it,
you know? But legitimately, somehow, what
I love that they chose like the craziest fucking wallpaper for this too. But by the way, I can read, and I have a little bit of a color perception issue with my eyes. I can read fucking absolutely everything here without even the slightest issue.
But they shipped is worse.
It's not shipped. It's a developer beta.
Beyond messy. It's heavy. It's hard to see.
It's heavy. I don't have any battery life issues. Like, I have a bug where if my Mac is charging, it gets really hot. But in terms of like regular system, no, it's not heavy.
It's change for the sake of it, and it feels like no one was given enough time to think this one through. Despite all the rumors of perfectly circular icons, the first—
What is perfectly circular? Yeah, just circular. No, this looks bad. Like, this looks bad on iOS, and I've been telling that to people time and time again. The reason why it kind of works in watchOS is because your main UI element on an Apple Watch is a mostly circular watch face. I am still in the thinking that I would actually prefer rounded squares on the Apple Watch 2. On visionOS, the main inspiration is actually your field of view, which is kind of like a big oval, right? Like two overlapping circles. That's how you get circles. Plus, your main input method is your eyes, actually. So that kind of makes sense. On iPhone, why would it be circular? The iPhone screen is a rounded rectangle. That's what the icons are themselves, too.
First time we leaked the home screen, we said that based on the version that we had seen, the icons were actually the same shape. That more or less,
Thank
this
God.
seemed to be a visual overhaul more than anything else. In the second version we saw, the icons were still the same shape.
Yeah, but now the question is, what about the consistency? Would iPads get circular? Why would they? iPads are way more square and rectangular than even the iPhone is. What about Macs, which are like flat white screen panels with a dog? Like,
But with these weird rounder icons hidden behind a secret animation.
yeah, I guess the roundedness actually was not hiding the different shape, but it was hiding the glow animation around it.
To which I said might just be a glitch, and well, turns out it was that. It was that. It was a glitch. It was not real, unfortunately.
What? Really? You wanted that fucking random Samsung shape that like almost looks like a swollen rectangle that like gets puffy on the sides but somewhat circular on top? What's up with your taste? Do you have no taste?
What we got here really is just a visual vibe change only.
Yes, that's what people wanted. Nobody wants something that dramatically changes your muscle memory. The control center is barely like 2 operating systems new. Jesus.
It's just iOS 18 with a few more features that were probably supposed to ship last year, if we're being honest.
What does that mean? What does that, like, you realize that Windows 11 has been like on the market now for like 5 years, and like it had multiple delayed features, like it had features that had to be recalled, like recall. We had features that were device exclusive, like Copilot, that then aren't fully, because one is Copilot Plus, one is regular Copilot. Yeah, stuff gets sometimes delayed. Android 16 just launched. Android 16, that thing that primarily was marketed for what? For Material 3 Expressive, for its redesign. Guess what? It just came out for the fucking Pixel without the redesign. The redesign is coming out in like 3 months in the fall, maybe in 2 months. Solomon, I'm sure Apple had that icon design and later changed it. Well, I mean, it's just like a shape experiment, right? I mean, the fact that the glow was there suggests to me that they were simply experimenting with different shapes and stuff like that, but that the glow was the main thing behind it.
But didn't, and a redesign to that. I feel like iOS didn't need just a redesign. It needed a reset. I fear that Apple is losing control.
You said that in the iPhone 10 days. It's literally like 7 years ago you said Apple sucks now.
Losing touch, losing...
How often does Apple need to reset itself? Is it like human skin? Like every 7 years it has to be, it's roughly all new? What is he talking about?
Themselves.
Oh, God.
Can I talk to you about
pseudo philosophical bullshit by people who haven't read anything about psychology or philosophy? Yes, please, man, enlighten me. I'm all ears.
And can I do that after the sponsor?
No,
Guess so. Show
we're
us what matters.
skipping.
And am I right? Find a better level. Their MagSafe card N52 products, they're 3 in 1 wild accessory market. And Apple fans were kind of used to constant W's. Even when Apple...
Who is we? You, the guy who said 7 years ago that Apple sucks? Even though, by the way, there hasn't been like back from in that era, nothing really changed. Like what? We got iOS 12 at best, right, as a refinement year of iOS 11, but his issues even went back to the iPhone 10 itself.
Is slower than the competition, they're still more complete, more cohesive, more intentional. Lately, though, they're kind of none of that. Even if it sucks to acknowledge, let's take a step back. Their biggest swings in the last couple of years were Vision Pro, Apple Intelligence.
You realize that Vision Pro is a phenomenal product. Like everyone who uses it says it's great. People are just waiting for a thinner, for a smaller and cheaper version of it. Plus, Everybody try. Jesus Christ, it's all the same talking points. Who forces you to buy Vision Pro? Vision Pro was not even pitched remotely. It's like an iPhone replacement. It wasn't even pitched to be used outside. Do you understand what it means when Apple tells you, oh, it's a product to be basically used at home?
And
For
now,
$3,500 nonetheless?
iOS 26. All of those, in my
You see how he had nothing to mention. Like with Apple Intelligence, yes, we had that very public, somewhat very embarrassing Apple Siri AI delay. But Apple still launched like close to 20 features that are based on AI. And they're improving other features like, oh God, this is so annoying. This is so annoying. Apple AI voice. Change to English. New. Accessibility. Whisper flow. Voice dictation in every app. There was a report. I think it was linked on Discord. About Apple's voice feature, right? That allows you to basically create an AI voice for yourself if you ever lose your voice because of of some neuromuscular degenerative disease, for example, right? So thank you for sharing it, Jimmy. Hands-on. Now, how Apple's new speech APIs outpace Whisper for lightning-fast transcription. So basically, initially launched that version, you needed to like give it like, I don't know, like 100 sentences to analyze. It took a while to process all of it, and it provided decent results, right? But now Apple has dramatically, like by 10x or something like that, reduced the amount of data it needs, so it's easier to set up. It processes basically instantaneously, and it provides better output quality than almost anything else. And yeah, here's like a comparison to like Mag Whisper and blah, blah, blah. Again, to me, the idea is that when people say, oh, Apple Intelligence failed and stuff like that, by that logic, you are also ignoring every machine learning feature, because that is basically what AI is. Some of it is LLM, some of it is more basic algorithmics. You're ignoring all the stuff that Apple has put into great camera and video quality. You're ignoring battery optimizations and things like that. These are the things that Apple is using to feed their operating systems, to feed their devices. There is a reason why with a 4600 milliampere hour battery, Apple handily competes with devices that have 6000 milliampere hour batteries. If you don't understand how these things come together, quite honestly, I don't understand why you're covering Apple for a living. There is so much other technology to cover. Go cover the fucking Trump phone.
opinion, are whiffs. Vision Pro is, well, you know, Apple Intelligence.
Wait, what is Vision Pro? Is it actually a bad product? No, it has some of the best VR capabilities on the market, a phenomenal screen, more processing power after like 2 years than the incoming Samsung Project Muhan, which is gonna be like by a factor of like 3x. And that one is coming at the end of the year. It has the best hand tracking, especially now that it has been improved. In fact, in iOS 26 it gains a new mode where it shows you in darkness your hands, right? Because it has all that 3D LiDAR data. That's why, by the way, Vision Pro was always capable of recording your hand gestures, while Meta Quest, for one, did not in the beginning, but then when it brought hand tracking, that was based on the camera, and those cameras are not too great. It doesn't really have the processing algorithm for it. Is visionOS a failure as an operating system? I mean, you praised it right before that. It runs smoothly. it constantly gains new features. Last year with visionOS 2, now a lot of stuff in visionOS 3 that has been very positively received, from compatibility with VR controllers like PSVR 2 Sense controllers, to even the fun ability to put like calendars and images and clocks right in your physical space, just like you would your apps all around you, right? It has some of the best 3D tracking. So if you move away, but then you come back, all your windows, all your apps return to the same stage. Like like this is why I think a lot of people are just not debate bro enough. They're not like Reddit debate bro like I used to be like 10 years ago, even though not on Reddit. Like if you actually forced him to finish the sentence, then the one failure of Vision Pro was not becoming a mass market hit in the first generation. That's the only failure of Vision Pro. It is, and all those failures are explained by a few things. First, it's very expensive right now. It's basically like a developer first product that has a fantastic consumer mode, right? Which is different from something like HoloLens, which, by the way, ended up being a complete failure and stopped selling to regular consumers. Basically, it's only like a military exercise device at this point. And it's bulky, right? It's expensive and it's bulky. Those are very, very natural issues for a first generation product. In fact, the major rumors for next year are that Vision Pro is getting like a Vision Air, or at least like a redesign that will make it lighter and cheaper. That's it. Vision Pro did not fail in performance, in display quality, even in battery life, right? Sure, that solution with the cable, it might seem odd at first, but it did allow for best-in-class performance, best-in-class display quality, best-in-class hand tracking, best-in-class eye tracking, all at once, right? All without even a significant performance overhead over the M2 chip, because it also has the R1 chip inside. So that's all the things that make it expensive right now.
Is basically a straight up marketing farce, leading to actual.
I mean, was Apple successfully sued for it? Is all of Apple Intelligence missing? Or is it just Siri? Are we ignoring everything from writing tools, Genmoji, Image Playground? And you can argue if some of those things are good or bad, right? But like there is a lot more. Even all the new features that like Google mentioned as Apple stealing, right? Like inline translation in messages or in FaceTime, spam filtering in the phone or FaceTime app. All of that is powered by AI. It's powered by algorithms. It's part of Apple Intelligence.
Lawsuits, Apple hiding previous claims, and full-on damage.
What is hiding? Apple acknowledged it and deleted the ad. The ad it was deleted because it was not up to date, because Apple delayed those features, and that's why they pulled that ad. Where's the hiding? Do you think Apple believed that would be like people would forget that the ad existed? And that put way more attention on the ad for it to be deleted. You didn't even need like a Wayback Machine to watch it. People save every fucking Apple ad ever made. There are YouTube channels dedicated to it. What is that wording? Apple hid it.
Control. And iOS 26.
This is completely factual. This is basically like, this is almost defamatory.
Is a slop fest covered in liquid glass. It's kind of hard to imagine that they waited an entire.
What about it is a slop fest?
Whole decade just to put a new Minecraft shader pack on an already broken.
Oh, okay. So you weren't able to replicate any of those effects, because those effects, as every designer who actually reacted this tells you, they're way more complicated, especially for real time, right? This is not like putting a thick glass layer over an object in Blender. I could do that. I could download like a reference glass pack with the appropriate reflection and refraction or properties and put it in front of an object and then have that rendered in Blender. But that's not what's happening here. This is a live operating system with elements that are reacting to each other smoothly at 60 or 120 frames per second, all while not eating up your battery or your RAM.
Software experience. Coming in to WWDC.
Wait, does he actually make any points? We are 5 minutes in and he's saying iOS 26 is a slop fest. No argument except for early beta has issues. Okay. Vision Pro was a failure, evidence pending because it didn't sell like the iPhone. And Apple Intelligence was poorly marketed. Yes, that is correct, but it's also, again, look at how DLSS launched from NVIDIA. It launched with worse quality than temporal anti-aliasing. Look at the state of how Google Gemini launched and image generation launched by Google. You had obviously that famous example of putting glue on your pizza, but you also had like those diverse Nazis being drawn, right? Being like half Nazi, half Native American, because Google was really hoping that whatever you generate in their generative image tools, it would be diverse, right? Like, did people forget all of that? Do all of you have amnesia? Microsoft Recall only coming out now, offering your analysis of your system screenshots in a blank text field inside your system, meaning it's basically prime material to be stolen and hacked. Initially, do you forget the Copilot Plus launch, which launched device specifically on Snapdragon X Elite devices, still has an incredibly staggered launch, and most features aren't even that apparent. They aren't very well integrated into the broader platform, while a lot of features that you might think are like Copilot Plus features still run on the server, which require Microsoft to have access to what you type, to what is on your screen, so working completely differently than Apple's. Like, do you have any context to what is happening in the industry, or are you treating Apple completely disconnected from it all?
iOS was probably in, I don't know, maybe the worst spot it has ever been. Years and years of compiled code weighing it down, bugs and glitches that are just too deep to
by the way, that is not true. Compiled code, first of all code is compiled, so it's a meaningless statement. But like all running code is compiled. Apple has updated more and more parts of iOS, iPadOS, macOS. Every year there is more Swift and even Swift UI in the operating system. Apple has been rewriting a lot more of their operating system than, again, Android or Windows. Like, do you follow the industry or do you just make shit up?
Move, and an engineering team crippled by the...
Also, like, iOS 18 is a buggy mess. Again, iOS 18 has had bugs. I'm not denying that. But it's not a mess. It literally never was a mess except for one small release that was then immediately pulled, and that was, I believe, still a beta release.
Pressure of having to rush new ideas out in a matter of months, no matter how...
Do you think that's new? Do you forget how iOS 7 was quickly redesigned?
Talented that team is, it is impossible to go back and optimize when you can't even get a hold of next week's promises. It really does seem like the pressure from the AI space, many other companies...
Again, you're bringing up opinion pieces. Those things are not facts. You have to back them up with something. Also, again, and I say that every fucking time when I react to AI-related stuff about Apple, why such a different treatment for AI than Google search versus Apple search, right? Why did you not ask Apple to replicate Google search? Why did you not ask Apple to replicate YouTube? Why did you not ask Apple to replicate the ads business that Amazon and Microsoft have? Why did you not ask Apple to create their own cloud solutions like Cloudflare? Like, you realize Apple can't be everything, and they had to delay one major thing about their AI push, but they launched literally everything else except for Siri.
that are able to take more risks and fail more.
You see how easy it is to not talk about your actual major topic if you can bring up the same talking points, because you don't have to back them up, because these talking points are exactly that. They're meme-like, set in stone bullshit that a certain subset of nerdy tech Twitter guys believes. It's not backed by anything. Apple's customer satisfaction is extremely high. The stability for apps on iOS is still extremely high.
More often are absolutely eating Tim Cook's lunch, and the entire company behind the
In
scenes.
what? Like, how often do Apple executives have to come out to you and tell you, we are not building a chatbot? Does it have to be 20 times, 25 times?
Seems to be in panic mode.
By the way, that report also said that the transition is smoothly now in the hands of a new leader, that it's roughly working. This is, I believe, a summary of a Mark Gurman article, right? That said it's working roughly between 66 and 80% of the time. Like, you also realize that those titles don't often fully reflect what's even in the article.
It's getting harder and harder for them to hide it.
You're double clickbaiting people.
Big redesign, so iOS 7, was also a bit clunky upon the first developer beta, but
What developer beta? It was clunky when it released, you fucking moron. People weren't even using the betas as much back then in the public eye.
least it had the fundamentals down.
What? What are you saying? It ran like crap in the official release on the 2-gen iPhone 4. It basically ran smoothly. Well, by that point, the iPhone 5S came out when iOS 7 came out. But it ran smoothly basically on the iPhone 5 and mostly on the iPhone 4S. And it ran poorly on the iPhone 4, a major release from just a few years ago. What are you talking about? What is that revisionist history? Has he forgotten Apple's history? This is where I feel like rose-colored glasses, because I like Apple for not changing much, because I acknowledge that Apple has had mistakes back in the day too. I never glorify Apple's past. I praise them for things that they did well, but I also criticize them for things that weren't too great. Like, even hardware back in the day, the iPhone 3G was plastic, right? Which, again, it was nice feeling plastic, but we literally went from aluminum to a downgrade to plastic. The iPad 2 was a lot thinner, but it achieved that with a lot of internal glue. In fact, when it very quickly got side bleeding, where the LED backlight, you could see it coming in from the side. Right? Those were issues that Apple solved over the years.
26 legitimately looks like they literally ran out of time before it was in the hands of customers.
It's the first beta. It's not in the hands of customers. It's still another 3 months in the making.
Luckily for them, and
it's July from June. We're mid-June now, mid-July, mid-August, mid-September. This is when iOS 26 comes out.
All of us, the software doesn't actually publicly ship until September along with the new iPhones, but I don't know if that's enough time to fix what we're seeing right now. So a few months ago...
What are we seeing? You basically mentioned one issue, which is readability, which is easily adjusted with some transparency tweaks.
When we here at FPT internally got our hands on that first early build of iOS 26, what we then thought was going to be called iOS 19, my render artist and I both made comments about how the version we had that we were going to use to mock up and recreate to show you iOS 19, 26, we made comments about how messy and clunky and buggy it seemed in the version that we had, but
how much did you even have your hands? Also, you're talking about alpha releases.
Hey, you know what? We got 3 months until Dub. Hopefully by then...
Wait, why would it need to be fixed by Dub? Dub releases betas. You had your hands on alphas. you have no idea how much development happens in 3 months, do you?
This will be a tighter experience, more polished.
Of course it is more polished than a fucking alpha.
But I gotta tell you, and my render artist could probably also tell you,
I don't give a fuck.
with what we saw versus what actually shipped out to developers yesterday, it's not that much tighter. Is it tighter and more polished? Yes, but not by a lot. And what's worrying is what shipped to developers a few days ago. Between that and the public release in September with those new iPhones, there's also only 3 months. Speaking of those iPhones in September, we leaked that entire lineup too. We did that before our iOS leaks, so people were wondering if those leaks for the iPhones were legitimate or not. But maybe now you could go back and watch and be like, oh yeah, that's probably right. All I'm saying is that what we're seeing from Apple lately, well, it doesn't feel like Apple anymore.
Blah, blah.
It doesn't feel like they have control. And it certainly doesn't feel like the people that should care do.
Memes, pseudo-emotional bullshit. This is horrible. This is like ass. I did not expect to be this angry because of this video. Jesus fucking Christ, that's so stupid. Like, he repeatedly, like, doesn't bring up even any points. Like, does he understand how an argumentative chain works? There is a premise, then there are facts to back it up. You cannot just give us the premise and one example and then make an overarching narrative where you bring completely unrelated topics into it. You don't even mention anything that's new in iOS 26 regarding Apple Intelligence. You're treating it as if it just flopped. You're treating Vision Pro as if nothing changed, even though even Vision OS 3 is a big change. You don't acknowledge that iOS 26 is not the only redesign. It's happening simultaneously with iPadOS, macOS, tvOS, watchOS, and a relatively significant release for Vision OS. You don't acknowledge anything. You just treat it as like this glass bubble, haha, glass, or ass, I guess. It's an ass bubble that stinks with the poor quality of this video. Like, what exactly are you providing here? It's like, oh, look at those memes. Look at Apple did poor marketing and had to delay a feature. Nobody has ever had to delay anything in the realm of technology and in the world of AI. Didn't happen to Nvidia, didn't happen to Google, didn't happen to Microsoft. And some people will say, well, Apple is different. Well, yes, Apple is different because you know what Apple did? Apple did not launch DLSS 1 that was worse than traditional anti-aliasing. Apple did not launch a diversity-focused Google Gemini version. And I like diversity. I just don't like the crap that Google was trying to pull there. Like, yes, Apple is still different from those companies. But Apple is not perfect. Never was, never will be, because they're run by people. People are not perfect. Products produced by people are not perfect. Jesus Christ, that actually made me angry. This is actually borderline, like, just like retarded. I don't give a fuck. This video will be demonetized for like repeated swearing. This is bad, guys. This is horrible. So again, this example, and again, this is like Apple, yes, has to change certain transparency and translucency settings. We have acknowledged that. You can go to my Discord and see how people there are plenty critical of issues like that. But like, he even brought up some of the prettier stuff, like the notifications center, how it comes out. He also brings up that clear mode, right? But even here, he fails to acknowledge certain realities, right? That clear look for icons. Have you noticed how it works flawlessly for basically every third-party app? After just 1 year of Apple allowing app icon theming and tinting on iOS 18, while Android, after over a decade of having those kinds of features, still has a ton of third-party apps that don't change if you like, oh, it's a dark tint, or we're trying something like this, which wouldn't really work, but okay. Like, there is no acknowledgement of that, even if you dislike the overall approach. Even if you think that philosophically Glass should have stayed on Vision OS and not been migrated to iOS. Like, you have to acknowledge some of the positives. That's just not how criticism works. Because nobody will listen to you if you call it ass and terrible without anything but like, because if you think that Apple is fundamentally wrong here, that's not what Apple is hearing. Apple is hearing, oh, we have to tweak some of the translucency elements. Yeah, it's internally inconsistent, it's afactual, it's based on meme-like talking points from the nerdiest and most like reality disconnected parts of tech Twitter. Yeah, this is horrible. This is very much like his old video of like, Apple sucks now and it's your fault, right? Or something like that. Yeah. Apple's, oh, he did something like 3 years ago. Guys, do you want to watch this? I don't know why I'm going to watch this. Before we get to Drew, Apple is software. By the way, by this logic, stop fucking covering Apple at this point. If they're so bad and have been left in the dust by others with AI, do that. Follow that. Also, zero acknowledgement, by the way, with like the different challenges of like designing AI that's like running on device versus running on in the cloud, stuff that's privacy and security focused versus stuff that actively gobbles up every bit of data it can find. Let's see if 3 years ago he was any smarter.
If you look at the reason that the iPod exists and that Apple's in that marketplace, it's because these really great Japanese consumer electronics companies who kind of own the portable music market for a long, invented it and owned it, couldn't do the appropriate software. Couldn't conceive of and implement the appropriate software. Because an iPod's really just software. It's software in the iPod itself, it's software on the PC or the Mac, and it's software in the cloud for the store.
That's not entirely true. Like something like the click wheel was obviously a piece of hardware that enabled it. It had also a decently large screen for its time. It also had the 2.5-inch hard drive, I believe from Sony inside there, right? Which was at that point the smallest hardware available for a product like this. So even here, like, I love Steve, but sometimes Steve will also talk a little bit out of his ass. Now, he is correct that the overall experience of iPod was made a lot better through, especially later, the introduction of iTunes. But it was not just software.
And it's in a beautiful box, but it's software. If you look at what a Mac is, it's OS 10.
Yeah,
right?
At that time, that was actually more correct than it is now because, well, PowerPC era still had custom hardware in that regard, but it wasn't entirely Apple's hardware, right? PowerPC was based on technologies from like Motorola and IBM and that kind of like intellectual properties group. And it was also like used in stuff like consoles back in the day. But now, well, later on, Intel Macs were barely any different from Windows computers. In fact, that's why it was so notoriously easy to give them boot camp and make Windows run on them like a champ. But guess what? Now Apple Silicon has helped with raw performance, efficiency, system optimization with like APIs like Metal being written specifically for that hardware. Not to be just a good API, because Metal obviously also worked with integrated GPUs on Intel chips and dedicated AMD GPUs that you found in like the Mac Pro or the MacBook Pro or the iMac Pro. Yeah. But like now, it's not just software. Now Apple, it's also Apple Silicon. It's also a pretty standout mini LED screen. It's Apple's software that drives pretty fantastic speakers that are hard to match.
It's in a beautiful box, but it's OS 10. And if you look at what an iPhone will hopefully be, it's software. And so
that's also not entirely true for back in the day. It's the touchscreen. It's the software itself is also optimizing for that early chip, but that early chip was objectively not great, and no amount of software helped the iPhone deal with how slow its 2G modem was back in the day. So ultimately, the iPhone experience is also written very heavily by its hardware. Yes, obviously, because a lot of that hardware is coming from third parties, it would be pretty easy to replicate the package if you don't care about software at all. And that's what he's talking about. But no, it's also wrong to think that Apple is a software company because of that. Apple is a hardware company that builds software specifically for its hardware.
The big secret about Apple, of course, not so big secret maybe, is that Apple views itself as a software company.
Yeah. I never agreed with that. Like, I think that making hardware work well requires software, yes. But ultimately, I wouldn't want OS 10 on a non-Apple designed piece of hardware. I wouldn't, because if Apple were to do that, then they would face all the challenges of Windows, having to optimize for dozens of different configurations. And I don't think that even Apple's internal ethos and attitude would have helped there.
Dear Apple, what happened? Apple is in a weird spot. Excitement is up. Their revenue is hitting record highs. iPhone is up. Mac is up, even in a declining PC market.
I mean, yeah, that was during the pandemic.
Even in a worldwide chip shortage.
Wait, but that's why it was up, because the global chip shortage was not just coming from the pandemic itself. The pandemic also increased demand. In fact, the actual supply during the pandemic was not that low. It's that the demand was unusually high for things like PCs and tablets. Also, he's making this Apple software sucks now video a year after Apple Silicon came out, one of the most successful big software changes in recent PC history.
Apple hardware is thriving. Their hardware is next level, as you might have heard.
I think this is the first time I can truly say something is...
Wait, but you realize that Apple Silicon works well because of software. You can have an M1, like look at the Snapdragon X Elite. Look at how poorly it performs in the translation layer stuff. What are you talking about? Of course, Apple Silicon is also driven by software.
Actually next level. These laptops have been next level.
And you know what? It's true. We have amazing hardware.
Guys, we have a few more people watching. Please let me know. Do you agree with me? Do you think I'm cringe for reacting this emotionally, which I definitely did not expect to be doing? I guess I'll have to pre-watch my videos in the future. This video is most likely getting demonetized for extreme swearing by my standards, but yeah, let me know if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. We've been streaming for about 1.5 hours. If you haven't yet done so, but you're enjoying the content, subscribe, like, share. Consider leaving a super chat or a super sticker. Consider becoming a channel member, a supporter over on Patreon, stuff like that.
From Apple right now. The new MacBook Pro models are amazing. And I mean, the iPhone, from a hardware manufacturing standpoint, is unmatched.
I mean, that's also not really true. The iPhone 13 Pro was great, but for its 4400 milliamp hour battery, a lot of the great battery wins that it got over devices with 5,000 and 5,500 milliamp hours, that was software driven.
At a point now where the manufacturing process Apple has implemented is nearly perfected. It is so optimized and streamlined that these phones are more durable than ever. You've seen it, surviving crazy drop tests without cases on them, lasting for years and years on end. Yes, I would say that right now, Apple is making next level hardware. But I cannot comfortably say that I believe that Apple makes great products anymore. Because the difference between a good product and a great product is not next level hardware. It's software.
Again, this is pseudo-philosophical bullshit where you're trying to jump on something that Steve said in one interview. Yes, software is important, but like, I will wait for the actual counterpoints, because I remember this video and I remember barely anything beyond like, oh, bugs in release was there, boo.
No, I know a lot of you probably clicked on this video already fired up and you're already
Yeah,
down
I'm fired up, but not because of this video, but because of the video you will be making 3 years from this
there
video.
typing away at your angry comment. But do me a favor, just watch the video, the whole video. Hear me out. Then you can leave your angry comments. Let me make my case, and then you can make yours. Here, how about a story? When I was but a wee me back in high school with my early iPhones, I remember the kids with Android phones coming in with their cool new gimmicky features that barely worked. They'd always show it off, all
Yes,
proud.
Android matured more quickly than iPhones, because iPhones had a much better start, much better. And Android experimented with a lot more gimmicks, because honestly, at that point in like the Galaxy S2 or 3 era, they weren't really hoping to ever catch up to Apple in like certain categories, if they didn't go with like a different attempt, right? This is why even before we got devices like the Galaxy Note, we still had devices with significantly larger screens than an iPhone, right? 4.3 inches versus 3.5, 4.8 inches versus 4 inches. That's
Like,
yes, times changed, and Android thankfully became better.
Your iPhone can't do this. And then they would like look at their phones like over top of the phones and blink all crazy like this. And their phone would like take a screenshot or something stupid. And I always felt like, okay, yeah, you know, that's cool. But if I want to make a phone call or a text or take a good picture, I know my iPhone is going to do it. That was me in
I mean, that's still all correct.
high school.
Just because Android has also improved in that regard doesn't mean the iPhone has gotten worse.
Reliability. The one thing that always has me coming back to iOS, and I have used both Android and iOS a lot, but the one thing that always has me coming back is that. Reliability.
The reliability on both Android and iOS is so high these days that you are overestimating the smallest bugs now, because they're also regurgitated by like tech forums and tech Twitter. You forget what it was back in the day of like iOS 4, iOS 5. You forget how many issues we had back then.
Never used to worry about my phone not working or being too slow. I never used to worry
Now your iPhone 13 Pro will suffer more from unreliable performance than your iPhone 4, where you dropped on your head?
about making a phone call or sending a text.
Yeah, guys, totally broken things in the iOS of the iPhones of 2021. You remember the time you couldn't make a phone call or couldn't send a message?
I never used to worry about being able to snap a picture, a good picture, on time because everything just worked. Could I blink and
Everything just worked? Are you for real? Like, low light was crap because obviously that hardware was older, but we also didn't have software to deal with that. We didn't have features like night mode. What are you talking about? We didn't have features like portrait mode back in the day. And even when portrait mode launched, it launched in a pretty iffy state. It was literally a beta release.
take a screenshot? No. But could I depend on my phone to do phone things? Yep. I don't like tinkering. The onus of making sure that software
But you realize that, and I will agree with that, iOS could be a lot simple and less tinkery, but that's not what people asked for. Apple had to introduce widgets and a customizable home screen. Even in Control Center, you can change the layout, something that Apple clearly didn't want you to do when they initially released it, but then thankfully they fixed it in like iOS 18.3, I believe. Which was a bug and an issue that I called out, right? But like the app icon tinting and theming, that's something that Apple introduced a lot later. Now they're using it as a foundation for features like the clear modes on iOS 26. Yes, those are old. Apple now, because of regulatory oversight in the European Union, had to change a lot of systems, allow for site loading. Apple has to make APIs that, for example, here in Germany, PayPal actually works as an Apple Wallet credit card, right? So it's not just Apple services. It's not Apple having control now over that feature. It's not just Apple Pay anymore. Apple had to open up like the NFC standard. Apple had to like gradually also adapt Safari to a more Chromium-based web future, even though WebKit was always more efficient and performant because it also wasn't as bloated. Yeah, things change. Things become more mature, and with maturity also comes issues. It's such an easy concept to grasp. I don't understand why he refuses to do that.
Works should not be on me. And I am a technology enthusiast, someone who
From the way you sound, barely.
makes a tech show called Front Page Tech.
Yeah, but you apparently refuse to switch to Android if it needs to be done finally.
Don't want to tinker with stuff. And at the end of the day, they're just tools.
No, they're not. That is wrong, and that's never how Steve saw them. They have functionality that is very basic and tool-like and needs to be like your phone call, your message, your quick camera capture. I mean, Apple introduced a full new button just so you can take that photo quicker. Apple optimized the image signal processor to work with instant shutter, basically, and to capture multiple photos at once. So if a moron takes out their shaky hand out of their pants and takes a photo without even looking at the screen, it will still more likely be stable than it was back in the day.
I just want an experience that I know and that I know I can trust.
What do you cannot trust? Like, even on my 26 Beta 1, like, my iPhone has still been reliable. I've taken phone calls, I've chatted with people, I've surfed the web, I watched videos, I listened to music, and I did all of that while stressing it by doing a lot of stuff like simultaneously and right after each other, so I could collect data for you guys.
But now, with my Apple products lately, I don't feel that way anymore.
What?
Hardware, even the best hardware, is only a vehicle for what is supposed to be good software. That is why I hate talking about specs on this channel, because numbers on paper do not speak to actual experiences. Specs mean nothing.
Yeah, that's just completely wrong. I mean, does it matter if if you get like an iPhone Pro for $1,000, but you would get the same screen as the iPhone 16e with thicker bezels, worse color reproduction, lack of ProMotion, dimmer, not as dark in low light, and to add insult to injury, not as efficient? Do specs really mean nothing in that case?
Your megapixels and your camera sensor mean nothing.
Nope, still matters. Camera sensor size, clearly we saw that with the 48 megapixel camera on the iPhone 14 Pro. Even because you sometimes cannot just improve software. Your hardware will then scale with
if your app doesn't open on time or take reliable shots.
If the iPhone 13 Pro literally has one of the fastest cameras ever because it has a very fast chip, but it wasn't yet on a 48 megapixel camera sensor or something like that. The 13 Pro was an incredibly fast and reliable device. It also and before the iPhone 12 Pro, it moved away from 4 gigabytes to 6, which on iPhones back in the day felt better than certain Androids with 12 gigabytes.
If you miss capturing that important moment, it's gone. You missed it.
I mean, is he providing an example? Was it common to miss, like, was shutter bad? Like my mom still has a 13 Pro. She's taking way better pictures than on her 10s before that, and before that than on her 7 Plus.
I mean, to be fair, you missed it in 50 megapixels, but you still missed it. That's exactly where I'm starting to get with Apple right now.
That's a bug, and it happened. Yes, it wasn't common. It wasn't throughout the entire experience, and those same bugs also happened back in iOS 4 and 5 and 6.
Open my iPhone 13.
Like, I mean, iOS 6, like, they have to remind you of stuff like the Apple Maps launch and stuff like that. Apple has always had some issues. That's just normal for every company.
To take a picture of something. It's just blackness. It just opens, the camera app opens up and it's just dark. And that lasts for about 15 seconds, even if I force close, and by that point, the moment's gone. I missed it. And the other day, on a completely different iPhone 13 Pro Max, we were trying to crop a picture, a family photo for an upcoming birthday, and it just, this is what we got. I don't even know what this is. It's not working, though.
It's
something
a lag,
so simple
so
that an iPhone has always reliably been able to do, and we just couldn't do it in that moment, and that's incredibly frustrating. And don't worry,
I mean, you clearly, though, are also like moving around with the fingers way more than necessary. Like, you're actively working to make the bug worse. I fully acknowledge that there is a bug, but if you see that there is a lag, the last thing you would want is to like 10 times swipe in different directions on the screen. You know that that's not going to produce the good end result. Also, in that case, you close the app and go back.
Have plenty
You
more to
don't
talk
do
about.
this, what you
Let's take
did.
a quick break for today's sponsor. AIM is software. Always has been. It's funny because I always used to make fun of Android manufacturers for putting so much emphasis on how crazy their hardware was.
But they also use the same basic software. Of course, hardware is going to be the differentiator of the devices. That's good. That's competition. You should never be focused only on hardware. Like, looking at some of the Poco brands and whatever, right? Like, I don't care how much RAM you put in your device. I know that no app out there will like specifically target your hardware. It's basically pointless, even if you have a Snapdragon 8 Elite in there or something like that.
Because at the end of the day, I mean, I know what their software felt like. And to me, just putting all the emphasis on hardware feels... well, it feels shallow. And
Well, no, that's not all the emphasis. People still cover the Android updates. Like, Android had, for example, like, what is it? Project Butter, right? Even back in the day, where they made the operating system a lot smoother and the animation frame times and frame rates a lot nicer. Of course, that matters, but it's also gonna be helped by good hardware.
now, it feels like Apple is starting to move in that same shallow direction. To be honest,
Just because you call something shallow isn't actually like that's not how words work. Like, Apple has always designed hardware, and just because you can use that one interview, like, you could take Johnny Ive's interviews before that, where he clearly emphasizes how important it is how a device feels in their hand and stuff like that. You could have the previous Apple vice president for hardware engineering, which I always forget his name. It's like a slightly bigger gentleman. I should rewatch like the iPhone 4 introduction videos and stuff like that.
that has made a lot of my excitement go away. Now, when I get a new product, I get anxiety. I get stressed out knowing that my setup experience is probably going to be a nightmare. Like, when I first got my iPhone 13, for weeks, my display just didn't work. Literally.
Yeah, but there were bugs, and I absolutely admit that. Again, Apple sucks now. I do want to remind you the context in which we are. Apple has more issues now. Apple's mature operating systems are bloated, even, you could say. Because, yes, that's what a lot of people want, unfortunately, these days. I would also prefer a cleaner OS. I would prefer less features in many ways. But that's not what people react to. You saw the reaction to WWDC. Mainstream media was reporting on the liquid glass redesign. Do you think that would have happened for an iOS 12-like release? Apple is still beholden to the market.
Touchscreen was just unresponsive too much of the time. I mean, could you imagine if someone was like hurt or in trouble and they needed to call 911?
Yeah,
they picked up their iPhone 13 and their display was just like, how about no? And don't even get me started on Mac OS. A good 10% of the time
I
on
used macOS back in that day, and it was completely fine.
my iMac, my cursor will just
Which iMac? Your Intel Mac?
gone. It'll just disappear, and I can't use my mouse again until I do a hard restart. The copy from iPhone and paste on Mac
Just
stuff,
saying.
handoff, doesn't work either. Something that, you know, is supposed to be amazing because ecosystem or whatever. Bro, it took me 5 hours to set up my Apple Watches this year. I bought one for myself and for Karina, both stainless steel, cellular, and both with their own issues. When I paired my watch for the first time, the UI was literally upside down. I had everything set up correctly in settings.
Did you configure it to the right hand? You sure about that, buddy? I mean, again, I do not want to down-talk his experience. Maybe he was exceptionally unlucky. I do, guys, talk to you about my bug experience. Hell, I even post whenever I find a really big bug. I mean, even at the developer beta, I do point out, for example, the charging makes the Mac run hotter than it usually does. But like, I've never had those issues, and I owned an Apple Watch 1, an Apple Watch 2, an Apple Watch 4, like an Apple Watch Ultra 2 now. Never had those issues. And yes, sometimes those issues will crop up, but those issues are not new. Like that kind of stuff could always happen, unfortunately. That's especially the more mature an operating system gets. Unfortunately, things like that do become a bit more likely. However, what also becomes less likely is that the device is actually fundamentally broken by this. It's very likely that a restart or especially a reboot will fix any of that.
Based on which hand it was on and where the digital crown was facing, but still upside down. I had to unpair and repair for it to work. Karina's, well, hers failed to pair for hours, and those are obviously big bugs. Those are big
I mean, failed to pair, okay.
issues. But I gotta be honest, it's the little ones. It's the small ones that make me feel...
Okay, so this, okay, this video is definitely better than the iOS 26 video. There are a lot more individual things here. Again, still not enough, even close to say Apple sucks now. But I get it. I will accept this a bit more. Because we've now been streaming for almost 2 hours, and I do want to be finished in about half an hour, I will give John a bit more credit for this video, and I will not be as bad towards him online as I would have been otherwise. At least, well, no, I actually have to be more angry with him now because I see that he is actually able to create like data accumulation that he then uses for his main thesis. That's not what is happening in this video. This video is just ass. That's why that's in the title. Let's look into Drew's video about his rant on WWDC 25 interviews. We have reacted to a few of those. I've seen snippets of more of other interviews. I've watched the full Joanna Stern interview offline. There's very little extra stuff there, to be honest. So she did cut a very successful 7 minutes. Yeah, let's see. Maybe Drew is more correct here.
A couple weeks ago, I did a video explaining that Apple was kind of chickening out by...
Yeah, and that was completely wrong because you're forgetting that other journalists than John Gruber exist. In fact, the only thing that was canceled was John Gruber's The Show.
First time in like a decade not going on the Daring Fireball interview. But then I saw
again,
a few thumbnails
one
showcasing
interview.
No.
You're literally like you're using plural for literally like a singular thing. Just semantically, it's wrong.
Craig and Jaws were still being
Am I the only one who is a grammar Nazi?
interviewed by a couple of members of the press, not that many. So I was like,
We reacted to every single fucking of those Wait, he has to be mentioning Joanna here, right? Joanna was worse to them than like I've ever seen John Gruber be live.
like, oh, okay, cool. I was wrong. They're still willing to sit down and talk about this, but boy, and oh boy, do I think this backfired royally. Let's begin.
Wait, are you gonna be reacting to the reaction rather than to the actual facts? Is that where we are now?
You know, for a while now, I've been kind of throwing Craig under the bus a bit for being the guy who kind of disappoints us with software year after year, you know, the stability issues or not delivering on features. But these interviews were quite telling. I mean, they say nothing, but also everything at the same time.
Okay,
it's clearly
good.
very scripted,
How
very
convenient
calculated.
that
There's
you
always
can
these questions
interpret
they
everything
give
you
vague
want
answers
into
to,
them,
and
even
you
though
can
it
tell
was...
they've been trained, mostly Craig, by Jaws, I think, to answer in very specific...
Yes, that's how executives behave. Like, are you all dropped on your head? Do you not know how big companies behave? Sony literally runs their own in-house interviews. They interview themselves and have basically like the answers next to it. That's why if you are a Sony executive, like a PlayStation executive, like Herman Hulst, who is responsible for their development teams, you know how he gives out interviews? First of all, the person in front of him is a Sony employee. He's asking a question that was prepared. He has the answer up on a display that you are not supposed to see. But because Herman Hulst is not a media personality, he sits there and he is asked, what about the live service games, right? You had like a big failure with Concord. Like, what do you do about it, right? And now you have to remember, Herman Hulst is not a media personality. He does not often read from, like he does not often talk to the press while reading out something, right? So basically, this totally naturally looking interview performs like this. Yes, our live service games, I'm trying to do like a Norwegian accent, but I'm probably gonna mess it up. Our live service interviews, no, that's just Santa Claus at this point. Our live service interviews are our live service games are very important to us. You also see sometimes when like the next line comes up and he's not very trained to like pre-read it almost. We focused on our single-player games to provide the best possible experience, and we are determined to expand our portfolio with live service games that will be coming to PlayStation 5, and of course, we're expanding with a focus on PC and cloud, right? That's how it looks. Like, in comparison to those Craig interviews were gold.
Specific ways, how they have
Not everything can be like the cuck chair interviews that Phil Schiller had to give when Xbox was forced essentially by Microsoft to launch games on PlayStation. And people were holding his feet over the fire for this, but he had to come out and talk about it. And he deliberately even lied. So no, what Craig is doing is so much not like special in the industry.
two different versions.
I feel like these people treat Apple like I almost wonder if they watch other stuff, because I do keep up with NVIDIA hardware, AMD, Intel, all kinds of PC laptops. Like I watch everything from Just Josh and Jared's Tech and even LTT. God knows we react to them sometimes. I watch Hardware Unboxed. I watch Gamers Nexus. For console stuff, I watch people like Mystic Ryan, who covers PlayStation in a lot of detail. Sometimes I will even tune in into Nintendo Live to get a very fanboyish, very happy perspective about NVIDIA hardware and games. Like, do these people only follow Apple and then believe that Apple is supposed to act not like a multinational $3 trillion corporation?
Of the more
Do they not know how many delays and disappointing launches have plagued the era of AI in the last 4 to 5 years? I always bring them up, like DLSS, Google Gemini launch, stuff like that, a Copilot Plus.
personalized Siri, and that version 2 was just not quite up to the high bar we set
No,
for
version 1 was not quite good enough. Version 2 is the improved version, but it's not yet ready.
Apple products. Classic PR marketing mumbo jumbo. It's like
No, what do you mean? Apple internally has like, it doesn't even use terms like a lot of the rest in the industry. For example, a lot of the rest of the industry uses a term called minimum viable product, MVP, right? Apple, in a very pretentious Johnny Ive inspired way, I'm not sure if that's still the case, I believe they call it a minimally delightful product or something like that, right? I forget the exact term. Like, no, of course. What do you mean? Meeting a certain quality standard, when that quality standard, let's say, is 90%, and from the Mark Gurman report, we know that it's between 66 and 80%. So Apple roughly needs 6 months to a year additionally. It was planned to launch in April. So make the calculation. Plus, consider the fact that Apple's software efforts right now are being very much taken up by stuff like the iOS 26 redesign.
Easiest way to brag about yourself while saying we also are missing
Yes,
time.
that's what executives are supposed to do. You're supposed to not like apologize while groveling at the feet of the journalist. Because all of that will be reinterpreted in the negative way. Like, we as tech enthusiasts who know every ins and outs of Apple, though I am starting to doubt if that actually applies to these people, we would feel great about a big, heartfelt Apple apology in the end. But fundamentally, what matters way more is actions. And Apple gave the Siri team new leadership. They delayed the feature. And now they're working on bringing it up to their usual standards. That's how it works. There's not much else to do. Just like Rockstar Games came out a few months ago and said, "Oh, our GTA game, that's launching later than expected. It's launching in a year, in 2026. I believe it's May something 2026, right? That's okay. That happens." Ben Winnie, I'm watching your React to iOS 26 video of FPT and I'm crying. Well, great, man. I'm great you're enjoying it because I didn't. I got so loud and I used so fucking many swear words.
But I gotta hand it to him. Craig is doing
Ben Winnie, shout out if you are watching this in full, leave like comments, maybe with not thumbnails, with like timestamps of what are interesting moments to watch, because I'm probably not going to be leaving very detailed thumbnails on timestamps on this, probably just commenting on like you're reacting here, I'm reacting here, I'm reacting here, and I'm reacting here.
a fantastic job considering how harsh Jaws is in all of these interviews. My god, Greg Joswiak is like the police in these interviews. He is just straight-faced, cold, dead in the eyes,
I
locked
love
in.
him. But did you not like listen to him actually? Did you not listen? For one, he did comment on very crucial things in a way that many people refuse to accept it. Like he said, we are not building chatbots. We are not going to be replicating the functionality of every single competitor in the market right now. He also brought up Steve's comments, right? And metaphors. Like, he would talk like you would expect, like a very... Do you think Steve, the guy who said you were holding it wrong about the iPhone 4 antenna gate, do you think that guy would be more human in that regard than Greg Joswiak is right now?
Focusing on Craig saying, don't say anything that goes off script. You know what you're allowed to say, and you know what you can't.
Yeah, but that's also about like future-facing stuff. Think about like Tom Holland, for example, being cast as Spider-Man. And unfortunately, blabbering a little bit too much in interviews and potentially revealing stuff about Marvel's future plans that Marvel wanted to reveal in a more controlled environment and with more marketing and stuff like that, and also stuff that could even be still changing behind the scenes. There have been movie rewrites and reshoots. The same thing is happening now with Craig. People are telling them, look, Craig, you're the software guy. We know you have a lot of insight of what's happening there, and probably a good idea of how long it will take. But we internally have decided we are not talking about it before next year. Maybe we will talk about it with the iPhone release or the Mac release, but that will be a spontaneous decision if the quality is right. If you go out and tell people, oh, well, I personally think it will be 3 months from now that we'll talk about it, and that doesn't happen, that will create more backlash for the company. That's why he's not supposed to talk. Not because like Apple is lying lying or something like that. In fact, Apple wants to stop the repeating of the issues that happened with the original Siri promises. I thought that's what you people wanted.
Say, and I don't know about you guys, but to me it just comes across really, really disingenuous. Like, it comes across as calculated and cold, and pretty much the only question it seems Jaws wants people to ask is, wow, I love liquid glass.
That's
Can you
not
tell me
true.
why I should...
He also talked about other Apple Intelligence features that are running in iOS 26. Also, yes, that is what a press outreach works like. You create your own material, your own event, you create ads, then you reach out to customers, and Craig cannot come into my home and put his finger on my screen and say, do you like these? Like, look at my hair and now look at liquid glass. That's not happening. That's also what the press is for. The press is supposed to challenge Apple's own interpretation of where they are. But the press is also a mouthpiece indirectly. That, of course, you have to use that for yourself. That's also true for every YouTuber. When you make an apology, and hopefully not with a fucking ukulele, right? You will make also excuses for yourself, because that's part of it. You will try to contextualize a bad thing. You will try to also explain, but look, guys, I've been good for all those years, right? Only touched the kid once. Sorry. That's a bad joke, but it's a very edgy joke, but I'm really riled up today, man.
Love it even more. Like, they only want the softballs. If you really want a harsh interview, the Wall Street Journal one,
Okay.
I don't even think the entire...
So, what is this video called again? Rant on WWDC 25 interviews. And before that, he made a video called... We will return here, don't worry, guys. Tailosive Tech... Rant on WWDC interview, his honest take on liquid glass. Yeah, I always hated when he films in his Tesla. Should I ditch my Mac for iPad? That makes no sense. Like, the multitasking thing does not even change too much about his workflows. In fact, it never did. If he could use his iPad now, then he could have always used it for... where did he... Apple chickens out on real interviews. This is why they made that they had that Joanna Stern interview, right? Because they totally chickened out. Because Joanna Stern is not known to be like way worse than John Gruber ever was. Jesus, are these people not informed?
one's been posted yet, but man, she leans into them really, really hard,
Yes.
but it is justifiable.
And they responded.
Considering the circumstances.
Siri should be as good, if not better, than the competition.
No, but not in every way. Siri should be great for on-device tasks and integrated functionality, but no, Siri should not be a chatbot. Just as Spotlight Search doesn't need to be a Google search competitor, just like Apple Podcasts doesn't need to be a YouTube competitor. Apple builds different things. Just as Apple's cloud features are not supposed to be like a Cloudflare or like a Microsoft Azure competitor. Apple cannot be in every market, every feature thing simultaneously.
I think ultimately it should be. That's
But
certainly,
it's not right now.
That's certainly our mission.
I feel bad for Craig because he's getting drilled by these interviewers, and Jaws is looking at him like, you have to go back and restate that.
Yeah, but you realize that there is a reason for it. Craig is responsible. He's the vice president of software. In reality, the person who should be actively apologizing for it all. No, it's not Tim. I've seen some people say that. I think people have very unrealistic expectations because they've heard like the buck stops here about US presidents. That's not really how it works for companies. Ultimately, if you have a big team leader like Gian Andrea was working on all of those features, and now he's responsible for the core AI technology, not actual user features. He should be out here apologizing. That former Google guy.
In the Tom's Guide podcast, where I thought they did a great job asking questions and they were structured pretty well, just saying like, hey, you know, iPadOS feels more Mac-like than ever, I've kind of noticed, which is extremely fair. Pretty much every single feature they
Craig
added.
acknowledged that. He said we thought the user base of the iPad has changed, the hardware of the iPad has changed. We, of course, have now a more unified code base thanks to Apple Silicon. Plenty of reasons to make iPadOS more Mac-like.
To iPadOS this year is just borrowed from the Mac, and Jaws is very quick
I
to
mean,
be like,
that's not really true. The multitasking changes are not exactly the same as they are on Mac.
and hold on a second.
In certain ways, I think it's very more Mac-like than it's ever been before.
Maybe
I'd
it's
like
worth
to think
maybe it's
so.
worth Craig explaining it because it is different than the Mac. So why don't you explain how it works?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing, I've
Craig, make sure you explain the differences between the two and how they're not actually the same at all. And it's like, okay.
No, he's not saying they're not different at all. He also later acknowledges that there's overlap, but fundamentally a lot of people want either or sometimes both. Did you listen to the full interview? Are you really just gonna react to those out of context, literally 2-second portions?
Hey, it's starting to actually make sense to me what all of the issues are with Apple these days,
Right.
and I touched on it in my Apple has become IBM.
You realize you're talking about the company with you're holding it wrong, and I know better than the consumer what the consumer wants guy. You realize that Steve Jobs wanted the iPad to be in between a Mac and an iPhone.
video.
If you were a product person at IBM or Xerox, so you make a better...
Oh my God, they're using these all completely bullshit things of yes, Steve criticized companies that did not build their own software for hardware. Yes, Steve focused on companies that did focus only on marketing. That's not what is happening at Apple. iOS 26 is not a new Coke-like product. It has fundamental changes. The iPhone gets changed. 1 year's worth of iPhone updates is more substantial than what Coke has done in the last 50 years.
better copy or a better computer.
You have no idea what you're referencing. You're just using quotes. This is the literal definition of quote sniping in politics, where you're completely ignoring just how different IBM is or was from the Apple of that day and of today. You cannot say because Steve criticized one thing and now Apple kind of, if you close your eyes and do jumping jacks simultaneously. No. Benvin is saying, I just finished the reaction. I have to say that dude is confused. He refuses, John, and now I'm talking about John Prosser. He refuses to make an actual argument. This is why I was way more positive on his Apple sucks now and it's your fault video, because he actually brought up references to bugs in there. Yeah, Benvini, I'm like the Hulk. My secret is that I'm always angry.
So what? When you have a monopoly market share, the company's not any more successful. So the people that can make the company more successful are sales and marketing people. And they end up running the companies. And the product...
Tim Cook, first of all, is not a marketing person. He's a logistics guy. Jesus Christ. He was handpicked by Steve, the guy who is making this speech, to be the CEO. And Greg Joswiak, what is his product title? Sorry. My chair is rubbing against the wall. How is it? Is it Greg Joswiak like this? Oh yeah, I spontaneously wrote it completely correctly. Greg, wait, is that? No, that's not Greg. Who's next CEO? Greg Joswiak. Apple? Yeah, Apple. Apple leadership. He's the senior vice president of worldwide marketing. What are you talking about? That was always his. Do you think Apple ever worked without marketing? Do you think he now has a higher position than Tim or whatever? Have you all been dropped on your head? Apple has always had marketing people in the higher up section. That's how big companies are arranged. Do you believe Apple was like a complete unicorn?
People get driven out of decision-making forums.
Wait, who? Wait, make an argument. Okay, you have this quote, right? Then tell me, who was driven out of decision-making things? Apple has hired an AI guy like Gianandrea and gave him a team. And that team couldn't deliver on time, so it was delayed. And now marketing, because they had an embarrassing faux pas by overpromising too early because they had hoped those features would make it on time. Now they have to go back and they have to be way more controlled in marketing because they've already accumulated plenty of backlash, and if they get more backlash, it's gonna get worse. That's why marketing people like Joss are out there. It's not a unique thing. Like, didn't people like Greg Joswiak, maybe even Joss himself, comment on something like the iPhone 4 fiasco? Do you think it was his fault that the iPhone 4 had antenna gate? But it was still him who would be coming forward in that case. Yeah, these guys have an absolute fantasy world in their head. They like, I feel like they pay no attention to the overall industry and believe that Apple is organized by like benevolent spirits that are left of Steve Jobs' energy, and they're like harvested in orbs and stuff like that. Like, no, Apple is made out of people. Some people marketing, some people logistics, some software, some hardware. Like.
And the companies forget what it means to make great products.
It all comes down to expectations, and that's what I'm.
So, wait, but an expectation can be unrealistic. If you have unrealistic expectations towards Apple to be different than every other tech company, that's on you. Do you understand what you just said, my dude?
I'm starting to notice.
Like, Apple did set the wrong expectation for that resulted in like Siri having to be delayed. They could have talked about Siri without actually promising some kind of 2025 release date. True, and that's a failure of Apple that I acknowledge. It's a failure that I criticize them for, but I refuse to buy into narratives that are woven about this one mistake.
These interviews, Apple has their shortcomings when it comes to delivering on software and overpromising on certain features, but that's not inherently an issue with the software team. That's not exactly Craig's fault. I would argue that's actually more of an expectation in marketing failure.
It's a Gianandrea fault. To also communicate the exact timeline better. And yes, you also, like, I feel like people also don't understand how leadership works. Yes, marketing overpromised here, absolutely. But if Gianandrea was a great leader of the Siri team, he would have gone to Tim and said, Tim, what marketing is planning to do with our product is bad. If there happens to be a delay, which might happen because here is our current success rate, here's our current failure rate, it cannot happen. You hired me for good AI, please let me deliver on good AI. Yes, it's a failure of the marketing team, sure, but also of Gianandrea and stuff, and also partially on Craig, who has to oversee all software. Trying to blame it all on marketing is artificial. Sometimes people fail even with the best marketing, even with the most extreme finances. That's also, by the way, a misconception that I feel like many people have. They think like, oh, the richer and the bigger a company is, the better their product. But like we see, for example, with the gaming mode on Windows and by Microsoft with its hundred thousands of employees versus Steam with a few hundred people, and the difference between SteamOS and Steam Big Picture versus whatever bullshit Microsoft has been trying to do until now. I guess Apple back in 2010s with Steve Jobs was hippie and smoking marijuana while doing the reunion, yeah. There was no hierarchy in Apple. There was no marketing in Apple. You know what? I think Apple was actually an anti-capitalist company. You know, they were sitting there and reading Das Kapital from Karl Marx, right? All 3 volumes of it. They weren't just reading the Communist Manifesto. Like Steve Jobs was like, yeah, guys, you know, and it might actually be true of Steve before his Apple days, because he was a hippie for a while, but yeah, that's a different discussion. Jesus,
Apple
I'm getting so tired.
And let's start unveiling things next dub that are not even close to being ready yet. And I don't personally buy this excuse that feels very scripted, very calculated by Jaws and the marketing team, that, well, when people ask about why it's taking so long to get the more personalized Siri, which was announced now over a year ago, and now in these
Yes, it was announced a year ago.
interviews, they're saying, oh, yeah, we don't want to put a date on it until we have a real reliable version of it running internally, at least, in the time.
No, it's not really reliable. It's up to a standard that's good enough for consumers, which is a different standard than just being reliable.
Guys were like, well, does that mean 2026? Or does
Yes,
that mean
it's set in the coming year.
in later 2025? And Jaws basically says, well, that's what we said in the video.
So instead of like an actual release date, is it okay to say 2026, or is that too?
Yeah, that's what we
broad?
said.
So
Yeah, that's it. But that's when Apple will speak. In the worst case, Apple will delay it further. But that's something that Apple right now is unsure about. That's, by the way, that's a very human thing that you are now criticizing, because you literally criticize them for overpromising. But now you're refusing to understand that Apple might be nervous to overpromise again. Like, think about, and I already brought up GTA 6, so I guess I'll bring up another Rockstar games. Think about how often Red Dead Redemption 2 was delayed. Does that mean that the actual end product was vaporware or was a lie? No, it was one of the most ambitious open world titles ever made, and looked a lot like a next-gen game during last gen. That's what happens.
It's like, they didn't want to say the number 2026, but he almost treats it like a lawyer. He was like, if you rewind the clock, check my previous statements, you will understand what the timeline is on this. And it's like, dude, loosen up a little bit. We're trying to...
No, that's not the context of the question. The question is that Craig already had said that we are not committing to a concrete timeline, and you will hear from us again in the coming year. Now, in the coming year, unfortunately, can mean in the next calendar year, or, and I looked up some other definitions, it could be like if you start tomorrow in the next 12 months, which I really hope is not the case. I really hope it's just sometime in 2026, which, again, and even like internal, like reporting from the only guy who actually seems to have that kind of insight, Mark Gurman said Apple is planning it for like roughly iOS 26.4, a full year delay, which is not unheard of in the industry.
Hang out with these fancy couches.
Like, to be lost in the gaming sphere for a moment, DLSS 1 release date, that was right with the RTX 2020 series, right? So it came out in February 2019. Now, DLSS 1 is utter garbage. It's for one, it launched on barely any games. It got very little support. It had to be game specifically, basically like compiled the AI aspect behind it. But then DLSS 2 was better, lighter, and was able to be much easier integrated into games. And that came out in March 26, 2020, over a year. Well, a full year, right? That's what happens. Basically, if NVIDIA had Apple's internal standard, they wouldn't have launched DLSS 1, but instead they would have released it in... they wouldn't have launched it in 2019, but instead they would have launched it in 2020. Gemini 1, a very garbage release. Gemini 1 Google release date. Please, no, I'm not meaning the rocket. Gemini 1 was first introduced by Google on December 6, 2023. And so this was a complete garbage model, right? So now we're looking at Gemini 2. Came out in February 5, 2025. Yeah. So basically 1 year and 2 months later, 3 months later. Again, basically a full year delay. If you know the quality difference between Gemini 1 and Gemini 2, you know that Apple would have never launched a product like Gemini 1. Microsoft Copilot, Microsoft Recall, initial release date, Microsoft Recall. Recall is a feature of Windows 11 that takes a screenshot of a user's desktop, blah, blah, blah. It uses Microsoft and ChatGPT 4.0. When it was initially introduced. It was announced. Really? Are there no release dates here? Or am I missing something? User needs to enroll in Windows Hello. Really? Do they not have the full article? Like the full story? Microsoft reverses call makes a recall feature. Oh, so that's June. So basically the good version of recall was also a year delayed. Yeah, Microsoft ships Windows Recall after almost, well, thank you, Windows Central for once. Like, you're looking at an industry that is full of year-long delays. And you're somehow refusing to accept that sometimes that will happen to Apple too. But Apple did not actually launch a recall, like a Siri in the state of recall, right? They did not compromise crucial customer security and privacy just to have a feature out. Copilot Plus PCs, I do assume it's now on AMD and on Intel. It would be very embarrassing. Oh, I accidentally ripped out my MagSafe from my Mac. Well, guess it's useful, contrary to what the Linus Tech Tips video said.
And nice coffee tables, trying to get people excited about Apple again, and you're like, refer to our previously recorded statement. And the main reason I don't buy this crap at all when it comes to, oh yeah, we had an internal version that was looking really promising. We thought we were going to be able to deliver it last year, and it just turned out
we planned on releasing it this year, but we have to end up releasing it next year. Yes, because current AI timelines are very unpredictable. Again, DLSS 1 to DLSS 2, Gemini 1 to Gemini 2, Microsoft Recall initial launch versus the actual somewhat reliable recall. That's not even to mention how long it took to bring Copilot Plus to hardware that wasn't the Snapdragon 8 Elite.
Didn't reach our bar of excellence. Well, let me ask this one, because I know after today's video, I'm definitely never going on Tim Cook's nice list. Are you telling me Image Playgrounds is up to the high bar?
Yes, because it's a playful feature. That's why it's called Playground. It's not designed to be like, oh, you create image quality. It's basically like a fun meme generator. Of course, it's up to Apple's quality standards because it's a small thing. Apple does small things too, but Siri was not supposed to be that.
That Apple sets for themselves. You want to brag about how, well, the only reason the more personalized Siri isn't out yet is because people expect Apple software and Apple products to work really well. So we set a high bar. But
yes, and there are different bars for different kinds of products, especially for a new technology like AI. Image Playground is playful, it's small, it's basically an extended version of Genmoji. If you ask me, I think Genmoji is the actual like Apple killer AI feature, the one that I use all the time. But like, yes, of course, Image Playground is going to be treated differently than Siri, getting access to your personal data, to what's happening on your screen, and control over third-party applications with app intents. Of course, those three crucial new things inside Siri will be treated way differently than Image playground. Yes, that's normal. That's so understandable.
You're totally okay with the notification summary feature?
Yes, that was an issue that was fixed in a 0.1 release. Also, by the way, it's not as bad as some people make it out to be. Yes, it has some fun summaries if there are a ton of messages, or if the messages are written a little bit poorly. It's a fine feature.
You're totally okay with
Yes.
Siri somehow getting even worse after all of the...
Oh my god. Yes. Again, no context for the broad. Do you understand that by the way, I ask this question all the time, right? Because like, how many days is it till my birthday? That it always works fine for me. Regardless, Siri does have issues. I'm not fighting against that. But like, do you understand that Gemini sometimes doesn't know the year you're asking from it? Do you understand that AI couldn't tell you how many R's are in the word strawberry? AI strawberry spelling, right? Why can't AI spell strawberry? An article from 27th August of 2024, less than a year ago. That was the state that many major AIs, including ChatGPT's biggest models, were struggling with. This is the base technology that you're not believing that Apple was not fine with delivering Siri based on this. You know, Zoom Enhance was announced was Pixel 8, but got delayed for a whole year. True. And they didn't hear anybody saying that feature was vaporware. But also, Benveni, be fully honest. Do you think anybody of them, for one, cares about the intellectual honesty behind it? Do you think any of them care about features like Zoom Enhanced? You could rightfully make the argument, right? Oh, isn't like the Pixel the main selling point kind of the camera, right? It introduced AI photography and night mode, and it even had portrait without additional hardware, right? Oh, it's launching this feature that's supposed to make up for the fact that it doesn't have like a 10x zoom camera like Samsung, right? Oh, it's delayed by a year, and by that time there is hardware out that actually has way better telephoto cameras, right? Nobody cares because nobody has the same consistency towards it all. And again, all those small bugs, for example, and some of the bigger ones that John Prosser covered, I'm fine with acknowledging them, like Apple Watch issues. But even on a random day, you remember, like it was like 3 months ago or so, we opened like 9 to 5 Google, and it had like 3 to 4 major Wear OS bugs, right? It had like an alarm bug, a notification bug, and a pairing bug. That's what I remember, right? And nobody cared.
These Apple Intelligence updates, and you're okay.
Also, Siri does not rely on Apple Intelligence for these kinds of updates. It's still more algorithmic work.
With the nightmare fuel that's coming out of Image Playgrounds, that passes your bar. Like, you didn't
Image Playground is also a separate app. It's not supposed to be like a full button is mapped for Siri. Do you not understand the difference? Is there an Image Playground button on your iPhone?
Hold that back until it was working more reliably. No, I call baloney sandwiches.
I call baloney on this entire bullshit video. On you and John Prosser.
This one, I personally think they were way over-promising. I don't think...
Yes! Wait, but that's not a contradiction. They were over-promising because they had hoped to reach a higher quality standard sooner enough, and that higher quality standard might have been just to the level of Image Playground for all we know, but maybe they're still away from that. Like, is it so hard to understand that different features can have different quality bars, can have different development schedules, can have different timelines because one is more complicated than the other? Can you also acknowledge that working with your private data and analyzing it is way more like crucial to get right than Image Playground?
version 1 of the more personalized Siri was that
Also, every kid that I showed Image Playground to loved it so far. Like, again, you're misunderstanding Apple. Apple is also appeasing some of the TikTok crowd and whatever. And Apple is not gonna give you like the Studio Miyazaki renders that that ChatGPT's latest image generator can do.
At all, and I think John Gruber from Daring Fireball was spot on with his analysis that something
I
was
think you're all morons.
rotten inside the core at Apple, and for the first time in many years, since probably AirPower, Apple was actually making promises, making advertisements for features they had no idea on how to deliver on. That's
What do you mean they have no? What? That's not how it works. AirPower was a feature that ultimately was a complicated. For one, it's architecturally complicated, but it also gets very expensive down the line. You probably with like fans to cool it and like a metal design, basically changing the entire product. Maybe AirPower could have worked, but you're also forgetting that AirPower transitioned into MagSafe. Apple found a better solution for wireless charging than AirPower. Right? In fact, they created an entire ecosystem of accessories around it. You cannot, in 2025, just take the failure of AirPower and pretend like Apple simply failed. No, Apple learned from that mistake, pivoted to something else, but in the same like genre of issues, if you want, and fixed wireless charging better than everyone else, to the point that people are begging Android manufacturers to implement the full Qi 2 standard into their phones and not just into their fucking cases.
why it's been over a year. They still don't have a timeline on this more personalized Siri, and they're very likely going to pull out of even more interviews after this year because, boy,
again, they pulled out of one interview. You aren't even asking Siri to generate image from Image Playground. Oh, you can't. Okay, that's well, yeah, that makes sense. Like because the prompt would be just very different. But I guess with well, partially because you don't have app intents in Siri, right? For everything. I mean, sure, it works with stuff like messages and phone calls, but deeper app level control just simply isn't in the Siri. Personal context, if not implemented well, can have huge issues. Exactly, and people complained about the notification summaries. Can you actually, like, if you use your brain, would you think, oh, man, our notification summaries really can have real-world issues? But notification summaries goes away with one tap, right? Because then you see the actual messages underneath. What about Siri, though? Because Siri is not really showing you the information. It's ingesting it, analyzing it, and giving you answers based on that. So you wouldn't even be able to follow through on what it took in like you can with notification summaries. Like, realistically, if you were like giving Apple any benefit of the doubt, you would say, maybe the company, after seeing some backlash for this feature, thought, oh wow, this way more complicated and way more potentially like privacy-wide intruding feature. Maybe we should treat it with a lot more respect now that we know how some of our other AI stuff was received, right? That's how.
I feel like the editors, at least at Wall Street Journal, were kind of doing Craig a bit dirty with this like Mr. Milchick attitude they had in the interview where Craig is
Yeah. I made fun of that smile too. Partially, though, that was also a result of, for one, he's not a media personality, and Joanna was sometimes was asking like a long question with context, so he was hoping to answer something, but she was still talking, and so he was sitting there with like a bad expression. He thought, oh, but it looks unfriendly at this point, I should correct it, right? So he made that weird smile, that Joker smile, right? It's like
simultaneously panicking, trying to answer these questions, but then you can.
But he answered every question. You're saying as if he didn't have an answer. or if he was proven wrong, like by some internal journalistic report.
Feel Jaws kind of nudging him like, make sure to smile. We have to smile. Even though I don't smile, you have to smile. You're the fun Craig guy. And honestly, after watching...
Yes, that's part of... do people not follow things like, for example... oh my God, who was he called? That big, I think... Filipino or Hawaiian guy who was like the basically responsible for all the Nintendo marketing, right? Like he was supposed to be the fun guy whenever he came out. The other executives could be a lot more subdued. That's just how it works. Everybody has their role to play in a company. I don't understand. Like, do you not like Drew himself does like marketing for like Telo trucks and stuff like that. Does he not think that he himself is supposed to behave and talk a bit differently than the company's CEO, for example? Does he not understand that there's a difference in those roles?
Couple of these interviews, I feel bad for Craig. You know, he's doing his best, and I know several software engineers, some that even work at Apple, and I know a lot of these big mistakes, a lot of these big screw-ups that we all talk about. It's not the individual's fault, okay? It's not the actual coders that are to blame for the short...
It can be, though. I feel like people always like to be like the man of the people. Oh, I'm not blaming the little developers. I'm blaming the big overarching big company. But that's not really the case. Individual people in a company can screw up. An individual leader that is less higher up than Craig or Tim can screw up. That's what happens. And that's okay too. It's okay to have blame a little bit for everyone. Because blame is not necessarily bad. You're not supposed to like kick them in the streets if you see them. That's not what blame is. Blame is saying, oh, the marketing team really misconstrued the timeline, really overreacted with ads. The worst part about this was played by the marketing, right? Then next failure is Gianandrea and the way he basically pursued this and how it needed to be like changed in between, so like to version 2. Then it's on Tim and Craig because they're kind of supposed to oversee what Gianandrea was doing. And then it's also on the developers who were working under Gianandrea. Of course, that's partially the human factor. I mean, that's like saying if in my hospital a doctor does something wrong, is it the fault of like the guy who hired him, who hired the doctor? Even though don't want to assume it's all males, it's definitely not. Does that mean that even after years of working well, if that person now makes a mistake, that's completely on the leader? No.
Cummings, it's usually 99% of the time the executives.
Yeah, it's very good that's what lower ranked developers will tell you. It's always on the executive. It's 99%, and that 1% can never be found.
And the marketing team getting way too ambitious and trying to fill up more stage time at these events.
Yes, but that's also what finances your work. Yes. Sometimes marketing will do a bad job, but usually Apple's marketing does a pretty good job. That's why Apple has an incredibly high satisfaction rate. That's why Apple has actually really good is very good at teaching people about new features and new hardware.
Have to talk about more. You know, we need to have 10 minutes worth of Apple Intelligence updates, and we need to convince more shareholders that we're a leader in AI so that...
Yeah, but now that's not on the marketing, right? Now it's on the finances guy telling that to marketing, right?
It pushed the boundaries. The software team very likely was probably pushing them to not talk about this stuff.
But do you know that? Do you know if the leadership inside... was actually there was I believe one sentence referencing that. Have you considered that maybe middle management screwed up and failed to be firm with the marketing team, saying we cannot show Siri yet, it will only cause us trouble? But maybe they were afraid. Maybe they weren't brave enough to communicate that. That's also an issue of leadership.
Don't publish this because we're not sure if we can actually deliver it yet. And I got the marketing team that got the best of these meetings. And they were like, no, we'll figure it out. You guys just have to work harder. You've got to pull some more late nights and you got to get this feature out.
That's not how it works. Nobody's telling them to Jesus. Like, what is that based on now?
By the end of the year, because we're announcing it next week, and then obviously it doesn't ship and they end up promising things that they can't deliver on, and we end up in the big mess that we're in right now. And I personally think if the chains were off and Craig could say whatever he wanted, he would probably be a lot more honest about the state of the software, and I think he could probably be a lot more transparent with like, hey, a lot of what people are looking for when it comes to generative AI isn't something that Apple needs to concern themselves too much with, because we're ultimately a hardware company that does really great software.
Well, now you're contradicting John Prosser, who said Apple is a software company.
We're not ultimately right
Wait,
now.
did you not say that, Apple? Wait, am I mistaken? Who used which
Oh,
quote? No, it was John Prosser who
a
said that.
couple of members. Chains were off and Craig could say whatever. He could probably be a lot more transparent with like, hey, a lot of what people are looking for when it comes to generative AI isn't something that Apple needs to concern themselves too much with, because we're ultimately a hardware company that does really great software. We're not ultimately, right now at least, a software company. We don't have the same data collection techniques that OpenAI or
But
Google
Apple has acknowledged that, and in fact, it was Joss who in those interviews said, we are not building a chatbot.
And there were straight up times like in the Tom's Guide interview where they were like, you know, the widgets in Vision OS thing is really cool, and we're super excited to see you bring like the calendar and the clock widgets and photo widgets to a more augmented reality device that's more affordable, like glasses. And you can see both Craig and Jaws just completely freeze.
As I was looking at that, I have to admit that my mind went from Vision Pro to smart glasses. And I know you can't talk about future hardware. Now, what's next for the platform, and how do you get more people to enjoy it and experience it?
Well,
wait, what is that question? First of all, this is a software guy. This is a marketing guy. Apple has an internal policy of never talking about upcoming hardware. They're not Google. They actually have hardware that sells. They cannot cannibalize it with the Osborne effect all the time. No, they were not going to bring up Apple Vision Air.
I mean, I want to talk about what's here for the platform now.
Yeah, that's how it works. It's a WWDC software event, and you ask them about hardware. Why would Craig be ever able to comment on that? That would be wrong. That would be doing a wrong thing to the hardware guys who are currently working on it, who might have their own internal timelines, who might get delayed. So why should Craig now be allowed to comment on that? It would be the same disaster potentially as with Siri. FPT video about iOS 26 got backfired. Yeah, I think he got way too harsh. Similar to his Apple Sucks Now video, which I still think was better than this garbage. And before that, it was in the iPhone 10 era, he was like also complaining. In fact, I even alluded to how Drew in the past made similar reaction videos that I am now doing against John.
Because I think,
which was a pretty big release.
They don't even nod. They don't.
Yes, of course. But you know that Apple does not reveal future hardware plans at investor calls either. Why would an interview related to a software event be different?
Go like, yeah, maybe someday. They didn't even want him to say that. Like, it is just so controlled. They just immediately freeze and say, well, I want to talk about what we announced today, because Vision Pro is amazing and Vision OS 26 is fantastic, right? I'm like, come on, this is not even human. You're making this amazing TV show.
Wait, but that's not a human event. What are you talking about? Do you think Steve was talking about like next gen iPhone hardware? Like whenever he was asked just out of the blue, he would reveal like future company plans and jeopardize the sales of the current generation? What are you on about? That's not what anybody does who actually has successful hardware.
Show on Apple TV Plus that talks about the forced nature of a controlled corporate environment, and yet you guys are...
Yeah, Apple is Severance, guys. You heard it here first. Apple is Lumen from Severance. Which version of Craig did we get? Was it work Craig? Was it personal Craig? Was it birthing camp in the woods Craig?
Are emulating Lumen so heavily.
You're a goddamn fucking moron. If you think that the most standard, we're not going to comment on future hardware comment is the same as Lumen,
right now. You can't act a slight bit like...
Do you guys have any media literacy? Do you actually watch Severance?
Like a human being in these interviews? I mean, I understand Craig can't say
I don't think Rockstar leaks the... Exactly! Rockstar doesn't leak the next game. Neither does Naughty Dog, right? And neither does Sony Santa Monica, and neither does Insomniac Games. In fact, when it leaks, it's usually bad because it means we were either hacked or somebody talked about it. Oh, and now it's out, but we don't have any trailer for it. We don't have any marketing material. We don't even have interviews prepared with our developers talking about the development process. And even like good developers, like for example, Sony came out way too early to talk about Marvel Wolverine from Insomniac Games. That's probably like internally delayed, right? And that happens. That happens to the best. It happens to the worst. Movies get delayed. I believe like the latest Avengers movies got like slightly tweaked release dates, right? Even the richest companies screw up. Like think of the CGI effects in Thor: Love and Thunder, and that's primarily because it was like a very messy production with a director who didn't care about overspending, who was having threesomes with like an actress and shit like that. I mean, good for him, but like, bro, you have to work at some point, right?
Like, well, wait for 2 years and 6 months where we unveil Apple Glass, which will retail for $13.99. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm just saying he could have at least said, like, yeah, we're excited too for the future of spatial computing. That's all it would have taken, and yet they...
What? But it's just a different sentence.
Immediately just have to be like, well, don't talk about that. We need to talk about today's announcements.
Yes, that's what it... But that's just a nervous way of saying the same...
What we're saying is we're excited for future hardware, and yet...
But Craig is not even the hardware guy. Plus, he specifically didn't ask about like Vision Pro 2. He specifically said, oh, it made me think of glass. Let's go back to the actual comment that they had to respond to. There it is.
And I know you can't talk about future hardware. You know, what's next for the Vision Pro to... As I was looking at that, I have to admit that my mind went from Vision Pro to smart glasses.
You're a fucking liar. He was not simply asking about the future. Yes, he later asked.
Enjoy it and experience it. Hardware. You know, what's next for the platform?
Yeah,
and how
he
do you
asked that about glasses. He did not say, "Oh, are we get?" Because what if Vision Pro 2 is still Vision Pro, right? The same design. What if Vision Air comes out significantly later, right? Do you not understand the complicated nature of that? Craig might not even know the exact release times for all of this.
Well, I want to talk about what we announced. Like the relating Lumus. I mean, I will retail for $13.99. That's not what I'm suggesting. Have taken, and yet they immediately just have to be like, well, don't talk about that. We need to talk about today's announcements. All they were saying is we're excited for future hardware, and yet you're still like downplaying it and saying, no, stick to the script.
But the next hardware might be over a year away.
Let's talk more about liquid glass and how amazing it is. But hats off to the Wall Street Journal for actually having some tough questions and leaving in those awkward...
But I thought that according to you, Apple was avoiding hard interviews because they like didn't participate in the show with John Gruber. Do I have to prove this again? That you were wrong? Jesus, I hate being an apology on an apology tour for a big company, but the truth is not just for the little guy. The truth is for everyone, including fucking billionaires. In fact, the reason why you should pursue the truth is because often the truth is quite bad. You don't need to make shit up. Apple chickens out on real interviews because they refuse to work with one specific guy who wrote one inflammatory article.
Word edits, you know, it doesn't make Apple look that good. You can tell Jaws was very, very pissed in that interview and probably thinking internally, we shouldn't have agreed to this one. This was a bad idea. This was a mistake. And at this rate, I'll be very curious if anybody gets to interview the Apple executives next year. And if they do, they're probably going to be super yes men. You know the YouTubers I'm talking about. I'm not trying to start drama.
Justine was a bad interview and I called her out for this. Do that, Drew. Do that. Please don't reserve your criticism just for Apple. Be true about who is a bad content creator in your eyes. I think iJustine is a good YouTuber, but that interview was ass. And I'm going to say it as it is. And I think your video here is ass. And Front Page Tech's video was ass.
But they're those YouTubers that never say anything bad about Apple. They're the ones that only want to talk about how great Apple is. And
but you realize that you have turned just into the exact opposite. You have not taken a nuanced position. You're just shitting on Apple for no reason. Or you're using one reason to like nonstop shit on them for everything else too. That's also not fair. Either extreme is wrong.
They want to compliment the executives, and they're going to ask them, like, what inspired you to release this color of blue for the new iPhone? And it's like,
I mean, sometimes that is actually not a bad question, but yeah, I understand that would be sound ridiculous. But if you actually look at very in-depth interviews with like designers and shit like that, they will talk about like, oh, this 5% darker blue, that was the key to it all.
no one actually cares about that. No one likes the real questions anymore. Apple's become...
Yeah, Lucky Chucky. My problem is I don't want... You saw me shit on iJustine for her Yes Man interview. Well, he wasn't just a Yes Man during the pandemic. He was just a Yes Man. He was known as the Apple sheep on YouTube in general, right? But I was shitting on iJustine for being way too positive, for talking about her stupid Chinese doll that she brought along. I later found out it's like a Chinese trend that like went from TikTok to the West. It's probably the same bot bullshit as Dubai chocolate. And I was criticizing her, and now I'm criticizing Drew. I'm super confused by his channel. Well, if you want to be less confused, I think there are two videos that answer what Drew wants to do, but also what his audience will not let him do. Where are his... Here, he made two videos called Airplane Mode. It was basically supposed to be like its own like podcast stuff, right? And he basically explained the boom airplane and then the cost of supersonic, right? And in the beginning, 6.4K is bad for his channel. But it's workable if it's long term. But then immediately the next video after that dropped by 3x, right? That is completely unsustainable. You cannot pay your bills with 2.2K views. And then he went back to Apple because he had one video. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Man, it's gotten all... Apple has become IBM, and I reacted to this, and I think that that video performed pretty well as too, right? And he promised to pivot to other stuff or even to other kinds of content, right? Like maybe different style and whatsoever. So then he's talked about the next big thing. Basically, he talked about AI and how he would cover competitive companies. And then, but you also saw this video performed really well. This fundamentally is still an Apple video. He might be critical towards Apple here, and 413K is insane for his channel. But the next big thing, because that wasn't just about the interview, but also about the next big thing for him to cover, right? 10K, yikesy. Then he went back to Apple, 50K, 128K, 20. Oh, by the way, then he shit-talked C1 because he couldn't understand that 5G cellular modem is not improving Wi-Fi battery life. So congratulations, Drew, for that intellectual masterpiece. And then you see like he's relatively steady around the 20K mark per usual. Then like some spikes when there's something interesting. He had a very praising video of the Pixel 9a. iPhone 17 coverage, right? But then he really tried to go outside of Apple and it simply didn't work, right? So now he basically is trying to say, look, I'm still covering Apple for you guys, but I'm not the Apple sheep I used to be. And I think, I mean, things change in life. we mature, our tastes change. We might deal with stress in different ways. Some of us become less happy in general, maybe more angry. But I'm not here to analyze his psyche because I also think that would be unfair, right? But he is buying into every single Apple narrative all the time. Like the Apple Intelligence failure, again, no mention even of the other features. It's always Siri delayed and Image Playground bad, because Image Playground does not what the chatbots do, which again was never the pitch of Image Playground. Image Playground runs locally on devices, optimized for devices with 8 gigabytes of RAM. Is supposed to be very quick. So I mean, if Apple made it like run twice, 3 times as long, then Image Playground would be better, but it would go counter to Apple's like almost immediate philosophy about interacting with iOS with a touch-based interface. And I feel like that all that nuance is gone, because I am fine with the criticism. You can say, Image Playground, the images are kind of bad. You should probably use some kind of alternative, right? But then when you're talking about this, I feel like if you actually use all of that, because don't forget, for a while, he wasn't even able to use all of it because he didn't own an iPhone 16 or 15 device. He later got an iPhone 16 Pro Max from a sponsor, basically, which is a good sponsor. I would love to have that sponsor. My iPad case is from that sponsor, so kudos to that. But yeah, it became a shit show because he doesn't know the difference between I wouldn't even say that. I think when he was an Apple sheep, he still criticized Apple when it was appropriate. But I feel like that Drew is just not a super nuanced person in that regard. But then his Tailosive EV coverage is usually nuanced. He does not try to find enemies on one side and then perfect people on the other side. I don't know why like this happened to his Apple coverage specifically.
Too big for their own good, too successful, and now the marketing team is just like on the same level of, I don't know, the federal government when it comes to formalities and promises and...
Yeah.
Wait, but that's not true. What? Like, but they did a mistake of over-promising. Now they're correcting to being more careful, and apparently both things are wrong? Was there ever...
Yeah, and that's what we said.
Refer to our previous statement. It's like, can you just say it's probably coming out next year?
But why? Why should they? What if it isn't? Do you want them to accumulate more backlash?
How hard would that be for Jaws to say? Like, how hard would it be for Craig to just be like, well, obviously we're working
But you also realize that maybe as a comment gets really bad press. People write it like, oh, they will put it in quotes and there will be Apple's new series coming out next year according to Greg Joswiak, comma, maybe, in quotation marks, right? Maybe all capitalized. I can see that in my head. And that's what's supposed to be done by the marketing department. That's what happens. And yes, that is very lawyer speak. And maybe I'm fine with it because I grew up and both my parents like finished law school. Like, I don't know. Maybe to me it just feels natural to be careful when you're overseeing tens of thousands of employees, billions and tens of billions and hundreds of billions of dollars of revenue and profit. Of course you need to be careful.
Very hard on it, and we want to get it out.
It's inhuman to believe that you shouldn't be careful in that regard. You're then applying completely different standards.
As soon as possible. If things go well, we could launch it later this year. But if it takes a little bit longer than expected, it might come next year. Why is that?
Because that might not be the case.
That's so hard to say. Why do you have...
I mean, he's asking the same question 100 times. I can only so much say that, what if the worst case happens and it has to be delayed by another year? What then? Do you know how much you would then be eaten up for that comment?
Have to be like, refer to previous comment. I don't know. Maybe this is just the natural development of a company as they get older, as they get bigger.
Do you really think that Apple wasn't like that before? The only person who was more free to talk was Steve, because Steve was a founder CEO. But Steve also said plenty of crap to people. He was often rude. He did, like, that was part of his personality, and some of it I could see even being charming. But no, Greg Joswiak cannot pull a Steve. Craig Federighi cannot pull a Steve. John DeAndrea definitely cannot pull a Steve. In fact, he's kind of lucky to not have been fired for this.
They just have to get way too formal and way too stale and very, very forced, in my opinion, which is not a good look. So how do you guys feel after
Again,
watching
this is also, even if that was true, by the way, it has absolutely no impact on the company broadly. Sometimes lawyers will force you to shut up. Sometimes it's the marketing department. Sometimes it's on the whim of the CEO. Like, it does not change the core nature of the company. It does not change that the people who are there are still fundamentally mostly the same people, whether it's ADQ for services, Craig for software, John Turnus for hardware, Tim is the CEO. I don't know why people are... It always like brings up, like, when you were reacting a few years ago defending Apple, you realized that those were still the same people in charge. When Steve Jobs criticized IBM for the marketing people being in charge, that actually included the people at the company. It does not simply mean that Greg suddenly put on a crown and said, you know what, Tim, I'm now above you because marketing, right? No, that's a decision that Apple would have made 5 years ago. That's a decision that Apple would have made 10 years ago if they had a failure like this. What about AirPower? What if somebody had asked them, oh, do you think AirPower is coming out this year? What if, would you have wanted them to answer that? What if Siri ends up actually Vapor Rare? Which it won't, but...
some of these interviews. Feel free to let me know your thoughts on...
Okay, yeah. I forgot to do one thing. Oh, I cannot... Jesus. I have to do my part. So the rant...
A couple weeks ago, I did...
Okay, so that's a dislike. Then front page tag. That's also a dislike. Jesus, I have never been this angry during one of my videos. iOS 26 is terrible. Liquid ass. Dislike. Yeah, okay. Good. I think I'm now somewhat satisfied. Guys, this has been an almost 3-hour stream. I'll try to give you timestamps for the actual, like, 3 to 4 portions of the video, but this will be a long one. I'm not even thinking that it will be, like, very popular. Usually my rant videos don't even perform too well. It's kind of more my deep dive chip analysis videos are the ones who end up doing well. But yeah, thank you still to anyone who tuned in. I know some of you had a good laugh. Some of you might have probably agreed with me. I'll probably not be streaming tomorrow. I had hoped to make this like a 1.5-hour video. It turns into a 3-hour video, which I haven't done in a while except for WWDC itself. So yeah, thank you for sticking with me. Last shout out, you can see it in the beginning of the live chat. I linked the Discord if you feel like joining there. But yeah, you can also contact me on social media and stuff like that. You can find it, links to all of that in the description of this channel. Last shout out for you to do what we call here as the YouTube jazz: subscribing, liking, sharing, and commenting, not just on the live video, but also afterwards. But that's about it for me from now. As always, let me know what you would like to see me cover next. Thank you so much. You are getting Big Mark at the very end as per usual, so you can see how red and sweaty my face has gotten. And I'll see you guys next time. This is Mark Tag, tuning out.